I understand your situation, Olivia. It's very hard when someone close to you treats you so harshly and cruelly. But try not to give up. Life will reward you for your patience. Rachel exhaled convulsively, feeling her whole body aching. Don't you see I had no other choice, she whispered, looking at her best friend. Powerless. I didn't want to bother you. I mean, you still had Ashley, so I had to go to him. If she'd known this was going to happen, she would have been better off staying outside. Back on her side, Rachel closed her eyes, trying to sleep. But the face of the satisfied man she'd been with kept coming back to her. Everyone's life had black and white streaks, and Rachel was no exception. Though at times it seemed to her that her life consisted solely of dark streaks and nothing good, uplifting happened in it. Sure, she had friends with whom she could share problems, but trials poured out so often and turned out to be so serious that she just didn't have time to savor those moments of happiness. But after every serious trial, even after the longest, darkest streak of misfortune, life rewards a person for their patience. The main thing is not to give up. Rachel was born not in the most prosperous family. Her father did not want a girl, and therefore from the moment of her birth treated her with extreme prejudice and even cruelty. Rachel never knew her father's warmth, never heard from him pleasant words of support, gratitude. She always felt she was not good enough, not obedient enough, not smart enough. She always remained in the background while her parents never stopped trying to make another child. Rachel was 7 years old when she realized how abusive her father really was. The man returned home after another meeting with friends, not in the best of spirits, but the girl didn't notice. She happily ran up to her father and tried to hug him, despite the sharp, unpleasant odor coming from the man. But Justin sharply pushed the girl away, glaring hatefully in her direction. "Don't touch me and get out of my sight altogether. I don't want to see you," he said with venom in his voice. Rachel was numbed by the abruptness, the surprise in her father's words. She stared silently at the man for several seconds, burning tears already flowing down her cheeks. She didn't understand what she was guilty of, but she rushed to apologize anyway. "Dad, I'm sorry, I won't do it again." "I'm sorry," the little girl cried, hugging the man's leg as tightly as she could. She was trembling, fearing an even more negative reaction from her father, for he didn't like it when the girl cried. And the fears were confirmed. Justin rudely pushed his daughter away from him, and afterward he spoke with displeasure. "I told you not to touch me. How stupid you are. You don't understand such simple things." Rachel adored her father no matter what. The man was about to say something else to his daughter, grabbing her arm roughly. But at that moment, Amber, the girl's mother, ran into the room. She immediately snatched her daughter from her spouse's grip, and looking into the man's eyes, asked what was going on. "I heard screaming as I was walking toward the house," Amber said. "As soon as I walked out of the store, you decided you could do whatever you wanted. Don't you think we shouldn't treat our daughter like this? You're in no condition. You should get some rest. Okay, we'll talk about your behavior later." Amber turned around to Rachel, who was no longer crying, but just standing there silently. There was so much fear and pain in the girl's eyes that it made the woman uncomfortable. She ran her palm through her daughter's hair. "Go to your room," the woman said. "Don't worry. Everything will be all right. Daddy just didn't know what he was saying. We love you very much." Amber nudged her daughter toward her room, and the girl slowly walked there on unsteady legs. But just as Rachel rounded the corner, which was a couple of meters away from her parents, she heard her father's angry voice that was so loud. It turned out that there was much more anger and hatred in it than a couple minutes ago. The girl involuntarily froze, continuing to listen to the dialogue of her parents. Amber fell silent, unable to think of what to say next. But her husband wasn't going to be quiet. "How do you talk to her?" Amber said angrily, glaring at her spouse. "It's not her fault that you are such a stubborn egoist. I'm sorry that I couldn't choose who to give birth to, but since you had a daughter, be kind enough to love her. She's an extension of you, and it's not her fault she got a father like you. Why the hell are you taking it out on the little girl? She doesn't know what's wrong, or why Daddy's treating her like this. Stop acting like that. Don't you dare talk to me like that," he shouted. "You are my property, and remember that. You depend on me. I provide for the family." The man came closer to his spouse, stopping a couple of centimeters from her face. "Or what?" he shouted, completely out of control of his emotions. "What are you going to do to me? Divorce me. Nothing you will not do to me." There was so much venom and hatred in the man's voice that little Rachel involuntarily shrank back as she listened to his words. Amber jerked sharply, trying to free herself from the man's clinging hands. However, there was no way to do it. Justin only squeezed his wife's face harder, making her grimace in pain. "How dare you even threaten me?" The man continued to shout. "Do you have any idea what I could do to you? Would you even think before stating something to me? You're nothing without me. Don't forget that." He grabbed his wife roughly by the cheeks, lifting her head to his, and looked into her frightened eyes. Rachel fell to the floor. She pressed her hand to her busted lip, trying to lessen the pain. But it was barely helping. Justin took a step away from hovering over the woman, and looking at her with disdain, he raised his head and spoke angrily. Justin was suddenly furious at his wife's words. He shoved her sharply backward. Amber stumbled backward and hit the coffee table. "Let me go, or I'll not only leave you, but I'll file a complaint against you," Amber tried to say as confidently as she could. "You have no right to treat me like this. I'm not your property. I'm your wife. And just so you know, I've regretted marrying you so many times that you can't imagine. I hate you. I wish I'd never met you. But you know, I was even comfortable with you. You had your own place and I just didn't have anywhere to go after my ex kicked me out of my apartment. I just got comfortable. Yeah, I had to work. But it's even good for me now. I mean, when I leave you, I don't have to worry about money. I've managed to put away a decent amount over the last few years to start a normal life without you." He stayed near her only out of pity for a small, needy girl who could not achieve anything in life. And she got pregnant by the first guy she met. He just felt sorry for her, even though she took it all personally. Silly girl. She said some stupid things about love. I was just a backup that day. Your friend you came to the party with turned me down. I decided to have some fun with you. Who knew you'd turn out to be such a frivolous girl and get pregnant after the first night? I never intended to marry you, and I didn't want or love that child either. I never loved you." The man stood up and headed for the exit. He didn't pack his things. He didn't say goodbye to his daughter. He just walked towards the exit with full confidence that he could start a new life. But Amber didn't want to just let him go. Justin hummed smugly and sat down next to his wife. For a few more seconds, he stared hatefully into her eyes, after which he said, "It's a good thing all my problems will stay with you. I don't need you anymore. Until today, I was still doubting my decision. But now I realize I should have left the moment you refused to leave that girl in the maternity ward. Believe me, she would have been much better off there than with a mother like you. You can't give her a better life. You can't give her a decent future. You're the dregs of society that no one will feel sorry for. You're trash that should have been thrown out of your own life a long time ago. I'm sorry I wasted so much time on you. Goodbye." Amber, stunned, looked at her husband. She had expected to hear him say anything but those words. Somewhere deep inside, it hurt unbearably. Tears came to her eyes, but the woman stubbornly held them back so as not to show weakness in front of her husband. The girl clung tighter and tighter to her mother, trying to comfort her. Tears streamed down her cheeks, which Amber gently wiped away with the palm of her hand. The woman looked at her daughter and saw in her the meaning of her life, which was worth living for. She put her arms around Rachel and, gently stroking her hair, spoke. "Mommy, don't cry, please. You are the best mommy in the world. I love you so much. We're going to be okay. Daddy was telling the truth. You're good." The pain was tormenting her from the inside out, tearing her soul apart. At that moment, little Rachel ran up to her, hugged her mom tightly and said, "I have the best little girl. I love you very much and will love you no matter what happens. You hear me? Always remember that." Amber tried to smile, but it was weak. She exhaled convulsively, trying to calm down, at least for her daughter's sake, and added, "Yes, my little one. Everything's going to be okay. Don't you worry too, okay? Daddy will definitely come back. He was just in a bad mood, so he said some things. It's no big deal. All grown-ups fight. And then they make up." After another hard day at work, Amber came home and realized she couldn't go on like this. She tried her best to be a good mother, did everything she could, but she failed. The woman simply despaired and decided to find other ways to solve problems, not realizing how it would turn out for her little Rachel. As the weeks passed, Justin never returned to the family. The man only sent his wife a message that he was filing for divorce and going to an unofficial job, so she would get nothing from him. Amber had to take a new job to provide her daughter with everything she needed. The job wasn't easy, but the thought that her girl wouldn't have what other children had was empowering. The woman did her best to be a good mother. But it wasn't so easy. Rachel nodded her head. The little girl believed that everything would be exactly as her mother said, not knowing that life is rarely the way we want it to be, and she would face many trials. Amber squatted down and spoke softly. "You said you'd read a story before bed. You always did that for me." She looked at her mother, pain and regret in her eyes. "Mom, where are you going?" Rachel went out into the hallway where Amber was trying on another pair of shoes, not knowing which one to choose. She fidgeted in front of the mirror, fixing her bright makeup and trying to look as calm as possible. "My sunshine. Mommy really needs to leave so you and I can have money for groceries and your toys. I have to go to work. When you grow up, I'll be sure to tell you everything, and you'll understand why I did what I did. But right now, you should just listen to me and go watch cartoons or go to bed. As soon as I get back, I'll come to your room and read a book, okay?" The woman looked hopefully at her daughter, seeing the doubt and misunderstanding in her eyes. Rachel was silent for a few seconds, and then Amber added, "Sweetie, Mommy has to go out on errands today, and you're going to be alone for a while, okay? I'll be back as soon as I can. You're a big, brave girl. Aren't you afraid to be home without your mommy for a while?" Rachel awoke to a sharp slamming of the door. She jumped up from her bed. Her heart was pounding frantically. Panic gripped her, and there was no way she could deal with her feelings. Suddenly, the memories of the past day popped into her head. She hurried out into the hallway to meet her mom. A smile played on the girl's face, but it immediately disappeared when she saw her mom. Rachel looked at her watch. It was early 10 o'clock. She was already a few minutes late for her scheduled appointment. It took Rachel a few seconds to close the door. The girl was scared and lonely, but she didn't give in to weakness, realizing that she needed to be strong and do as her mother said. She went to her room and turned on some cartoons. She didn't want to go to bed until her mom came back, so she waited for her to return, occasionally glancing at the hands of the clock. She didn't notice how she dozed off while waiting for her mother. Rachel nodded slowly. She didn't understand why or where her mom was going at this hour, but she felt like she should. Amber kissed her daughter on the top of her head, then stood up, quickly fixing her makeup and reaching for her coat. A few seconds later, the woman had already said goodbye to her daughter and walked out, locking the apartment. "Mom, what's wrong? You look upset. You're crying." But because of her age, Rachel didn't realize anything. She just sat down on the floor near her mom and gently touched her hand with her small hand, looking into her eyes. Amber was sitting on the floor with her back against the door. Her head was down on her knees, her whole body shaking with sobs. Her clothes were dirty, torn in places. There was no trace of her beautiful hair. Rachel didn't see the beautiful shoes her mom had left the house in yesterday. The woman's appearance screamed that something terrible had happened. Amber wanted to push her daughter towards the bedroom. However, the girl started to resist. She sat back down to her mother and this time pressed herself against her even more tightly and said in a thin, barely audible voice, "Honey, it's all right. Don't worry," she said with a convulsive breath. "I'm just very tired after work." "What are you doing up?" "I woke you up. I'm sorry, dear, I didn't mean to do that. Go back to bed, it's so early, you need your sleep." Amber hurriedly wiped away her tears and calmed down. She looked at her daughter fondly, but there was so much pain, so much despair in her gaze that it was just impossible to hide. "You told me before that everything was going to be okay, but in the end, Dad left us. He never came back. Even though you said everything was going to be okay and that he would calm down soon. That's what you're telling me now. Are you telling me the truth?" What Amber froze at this sudden and serious question, which took her by surprise. "You're lying to me." These times would be remembered as the hardest in the girl's life. After all, it was from that moment that her life began to crumble into small pieces, devoid of any happiness and faith in the best. Rachel looked at her mother in disbelief, but after a few seconds of hesitation, she agreed. "Honey, come on. Don't you believe me? Yeah, I made a mistake with Daddy. But I don't know what's in his head, what he's feeling, what he's thinking. I know exactly what's in my head. And I'm sure we're going to be fine. You don't have to worry about that." I'm really, really tired, and I want to go to bed. Will you come with me?" The seriousness of her daughter's reasoning surprised Amber. It was unexpected to hear such a statement from such a little girl. "Mom, will you stop it?" Looking disapprovingly at the glasses in her mother's hands, Rachel said. Rachel was very worried about her mother. Every year she drank more and more. By Rachel's 15th birthday, she was drinking alcohol every day. Amber became irritable, nervous, constantly angry, especially when her daughter tried to tell her that she was ruining her health. Amber was unwilling to listen to admonishment from her own daughter, and every such attempt ended in another scandal. Even Rachel's birthday was no exception. Amber, Rachel's mother, was constantly looking for a man who was ready to take her and her child. She thought it was ideal because it would be another breadwinner in the family. But the reality was more complicated. Each new man brought only disappointment. After a few years of living like this, it became harder to cope with the problems and stresses of life. Amber often went to doctors for help, but the medications either didn't work or were too expensive, and she didn't buy them. She didn't want to spend large sums of money on her health, and found an easier way to oblivion: alcohol. It was the worst solution possible. But she saw no other option and decided that alcohol would help her forget her hard life for a while. This is how several years passed. From the age of 11, Rachel began to work part-time, doing small errands for neighbors. In the summer, she handed out flyers. She did everything possible to earn an extra penny to the house, seeing how her mother it is difficult to give, despite all the difficulties and trials that time after time through life. The girl tried not to lose her positive attitude. But every year it became more and more difficult to do so. Rachel's voice was filled with longing and pain. She'd been trying to help her mother kick the habit for a couple of years now, but the situation was getting worse. Rachel drank more and more, ignoring her daughter's displeasure. But this time, after Ashley's words, something in her changed. A dangerous light flashed in her eyes. "Look, you're already addicted to all of this. You don't realize it, but I'll tell you the truth, even if I upset you. You're addicted to your cocktails and drinks. You can't even stop on my birthday. Do you realize how crazy that is? I'm embarrassed to even invite my friends over. How much longer?" Amber took a sip. The taste of the drink didn't bother her anymore. She was already too used to it after a few drinks. "What's wrong? It's a holiday. I have every right to drink to your health and to the best for your future. You deserve the best, darling." From that moment on, it was as if Rachel had been replaced. She stopped socializing with her old friends, began to study worse, and began to be rude to everyone around her. From an obedient girl, she turned into a bitch, arrogant and haughty. Rachel's life changed 180 degrees. She began to socialize with the worst company, mostly children from dysfunctional families, which had a negative impact on her. And her mother was not the best either. Compared to the stories of her new acquaintances, Rachel lived as if in a fairy tale. "Because I've spent my whole life trying to please you and do the best for you. If you'd thought twice before voicing your displeasure to me, you'd realize what I've been through." The woman rose abruptly and, adjusting her dress, headed toward the back of the house, leaving Rachel alone. The girl sat in silence for a few more minutes, perplexed. She couldn't believe that her mother was blaming her for all her problems, believing that she was unhappy because of her birth. Her feelings mixed inside, and she felt uneasy. She seemed to have lost the meaning of existence, no longer wanted, no longer a daughter to her own mother. "Do you think I'm excited about our life? That I have to work day and night to pay for all your whims? That I can't find a decent man after all these years? You think I like our situation? You know, honey, it's your fault too. You're the reason Dad left? Are you the reason I'm unattractive to other men? Are you the reason I'm working nonstop? Because I'm supposed to be a good mom and provide for your whims? It's your fault our life is like this. If it weren't for you, things might be different. Maybe I wouldn't have broken up with the father I love more than life. So you have no right to judge me and tell me I'm doing something wrong." Rachel finished her glass, set it on the table, and leaned toward her daughter and gritted her teeth. Suddenly, a car stopped next to the girl, and a handsome guy looked out of the window. One evening, when Rachel left the house for the night to avoid seeing her mother's new boyfriend, she walked along the road, not knowing where she was going. Familiars were busy. Some were fighting with their parents. Others had already made plans. After more than an hour, with no idea where to go, Rachel decided to go to the park to take a break and think. But she didn't make it to the park. The girl's mother did not pay attention to her behavior in life at all, giving herself completely to her desires and pleasures. Amber began to bring home some strange men more and more often, spending fun evenings with them. One of them even stayed for a few days, during which time Rachel didn't come home at all. She didn't want to see a strange man, didn't want to be alone with him in the house while her mother went about her business. She was sickened by what the woman had become. So communication between mother and daughter almost ceased. At the age of 16, she was already missing nights, not wanting to go home and inventing hundreds of activities to avoid doing so. She stayed in dubious apartments, could walk around the empty city at night, and even agreed without hesitation to go to some guys she knew just to have a good time. Rumors spread quickly, and Rachel's reputation was irrevocably damaged. The smile on the stranger's face grew wider. Rachel deliberately leaned even lower so that the slit of her top was right at the guy's eye level. She noticed how he was frantically, struggling to look at her eyes, not at her uniforms. "Is this an offer, or did you just decide to practice your seduction skills on me?" For the first few seconds, Rachel wanted to send him away, but curiosity overpowered and she took a step toward the car. Leaning against the open window, she smiled smugly and ran her gaze over the guy and replied, "Belle, why are you walking at such a time? Aren't you afraid that someone will steal you?" He smiled wryly and said, "Would you tell me that you are a maniac if you really were one? That would be very stupid of you. Don't you think so?" Rachel said with a smile. "Or maybe I'm just trying to put your guard down and make you feel at ease, so that you get into the car voluntarily, and then no one will see you again." "You didn't think of that," the boy replied. "If you were a maniac, you wouldn't talk to me so sweetly. Aren't you afraid to ride with strangers? What if I'm a maniac? Don't you worry at all about what might happen to you when you get into a car with a stranger?" he asked with incomprehension. "If my sister had done that, I don't know what I would have done. It's reckless. It's stupid to do that. Do you understand? And why were you walking alone in the street at this time of day and dressed like that?" A few seconds later, the stranger returned to the car. He looked at the calm girl with surprise. She realized she'd given the guy exactly the effect she'd planned. The stranger got out of the car to open the door for the girl. Rachel unceremoniously sat down in the passenger seat, feeling no fear or doubt in her decision. "It's part of my devious plan to kidnap a beautiful lady. So are you going to kidnap me? Or should I look for a new kidnapper?" "My mother has been living on her own for several years now," Rachel began. After her father left, she couldn't accept the loss. She tried to move on with her life, to find a job, to make a life for herself. But it didn't work out. So she decided to numb her grief with alcohol. She found in it peace, pleasure, and the opportunity to easily meet men. I told her many times that it wouldn't end well, but she wouldn't listen. It was more important to her to have a good evening than to make another attempt at a life. Rachel closed her eyes, trying to gather her thoughts and calm down. She'd never shared her problems with anyone, but now, for some reason, she felt the need to talk. She'd been wanting to share it with someone for a long time. And this was the perfect opportunity. Thinking again about how it might end, she made up her mind. "I have nowhere else to go," she said calmly, looking him carefully in the eyes. "My mother has a strange relationship with a man I'm not willing to be alone with, even if she's home. And I don't have any friends I can sleep over with. I don't have the best reputation. It's warm today. So I went out so I wouldn't sweat, because I don't know when I'll be able to get home and shower. I wasn't planning on getting in your car, and at first I wanted to send you away. But at some point, you seemed like a nice guy. My instincts were right. Sometimes you have to give people a chance to find the good ones. Don't you think so?" The guy had completely changed his demeanor. He seemed to try on the role of a caring brother or a good friend, saddened by her condition. Rachel sighed heavily. She didn't plan to listen to judgment and reproach from a stranger. He hadn't expected such a confession from a stranger and didn't know how to react. Rachel stared silently at the floor, questioning the decision. "Wow." Ben stretched out. Rachel looked at Ben questioningly. She was staying out for tonight because of her circumstances. "I understand the offer seems strange. I wouldn't have accepted it myself. But I guess you don't have a choice. My name is Ben." Rachel noticed the doubt in Ben's eyes. He sighed. You can stay in my apartment for tonight. I have a spare bed. I live alone, don't worry. I won't touch you. I wouldn't want to leave you on the street, in case someone comes along. You can stay as long as you want. After a while of silence, Ben suggested. Thanks for the offer, but I don't want to embarrass you, Rachel said. What if you have a girlfriend who misunderstands my presence? Her mind was filled with thoughts of what might happen. But when she looked at her new acquaintance, she felt a strange calmness and confidence that everything would be all right. Rachel, she shook his hand. He held out his hand. Ben started the car without waiting for the girl's answer. A few minutes of the road passed in silence. Rachel doubted whether it was worth staying alone with a stranger. Usually she chose apartments where there were other people, so she felt safe. But her inner voice told her she could trust the guy. Then it's settled, you're staying with me. We'll figure out what to do from here. He smiled. I don't have anyone, don't worry, Ben replied. As long as the neighbors don't mind, or they might evict you. Of course, I'm sure. I just can't stand clutter and dust. It makes me sick. I like cleanliness, order, no odors, and everything has its place. It's so much more comfortable. Justin smiled. Are you sure you live alone? Rachel asked in surprise. I haven't seen such cleanliness in a long time. Stopping at the entrance, Ben nodded to Rachel. When she entered the apartment, she froze in place. The small, bright apartment was shining clean. She smiled, feeling calm and safe. A strange sense of comfort filled her soul. You know, your future girlfriend will be lucky, she said, looking around. I would never have cleaned up like this. It doesn't seem to be a problem for you at all. Rachel sat down uncertainly on the perfectly clean white couch. He put his shoes on the shelf and gestured for the girl to come in. When Rachel took off her shoes, he placed her shoes next to her. Rachel reread the note several times and looked at the door. There were indeed keys left on the keychain. After a few seconds of hesitation, she decided to stay at her new acquaintance's apartment to find out what he wanted from her. In the morning, Rachel woke up to a completely empty apartment. She looked around and realized she was alone. Getting up from the couch, she began to look around the apartment and noticed a note on the desk: I've been called into work urgently. I'll be back by 2. If you want to leave, the keys are on the keychain. But I'd be happy if you decide to wait for me. Rachel didn't know how long they talked before she fell asleep quite suddenly. She felt a gentle nudge to lie down on the couch instead of sleeping sitting up. After that came the peace and quiet that she had missed so much. Rachel hadn't felt this way in a long time, so she decided to give herself over to the moment and just enjoy it. Ben watched the girl carefully. For a second, it seemed to him that Rachel's presence was so natural, so native, as if she was the one who should live with him in this apartment and please him from day to day. Smiling at his thoughts, the guy sat down next to the girl on the couch. A relaxed conversation started between the young people. That was only a couple weeks ago, wasn't it? Why would he choose to hide from me that he's not alone? Rachel pondered. Turning the frame over, she saw the inscription March 11th. The inscription seemed quite fresh. Why would he choose to hide the fact that he has a girlfriend from me? Flashed through her mind. Glancing at her watch, Rachel realized that she still had a little over an hour. The girl began to look around Ben's apartment, studying everything in it. As she passed another shelf, she noticed a photo frame tipped face down. Carefully picking it up, Rachel saw a beautiful girl hugging her new acquaintance, both of them smiling radiantly. Something inside gave an unpleasant twinge. Ben, I know perfectly well you're home. You're supposed to have the day off today. Stop running away from me already. We need to talk about our relationship. Let me in, or I'll come in myself with the spare set of keys you never took from me. The knock came again, followed by an irritated female voice. A strange anxiety began to rise inside, which was simply impossible to control. Tears began to roll, and at that moment there was a knock on the door. Rachel flinched and turned sharply in the direction of the sound, not knowing what to do. The boy's words about his sister came to mind. But looking closely at the picture, the girl realized that Ben and the stranger didn't look alike at all. As suddenly Rachel turned sharply at the sound of the voice, and at that moment accidentally caught the mug, which with an incredible noise fell to the floor and broke into small pieces. You're forcing me to do not the most beautiful things. You realize we need to talk like adults. The silence seemed like an eternity. Suddenly, the irritated voice sounded again. Rachel panicked. She had absolutely no idea what to do in this situation. It was the last thing she could expect when agreeing to go to a stranger's apartment. The door opened, and a beautiful, long-legged girl who had no idea what the situation was. "Well, you needn't try to frighten me with your aggression. I know perfectly well that you're not like that. Yes, I did not act in the most beautiful way, but we should talk about it. We're adults. We can't just resent each other like little kids." A few seconds later, Rachel heard the sound of a key turning in the door, followed by the girl's voice. There was silence, but now the girl at the door knew for sure that there was someone in the apartment. Her heart beat feverishly in her chest. Her breath came in short gasps. She stared at the door, waiting for the girl's next move behind her. And her worst fears were confirmed. She made her way into the apartment and sat down on the couch where Rachel had been sleeping a minute earlier. "You know, I don't care who you are. Just pack your things and get out of here. Consider Ben and me paid off. And now I have to forgive his cheating. Who the hell are you? What are you doing here in my boyfriend's apartment?" from the sweet girl smiling on the doorstep. She instantly turned into a disgruntled woman ready to shower Rachel with stares. Rachel was still alone in Ben's apartment, even though he had promised to be back by 2:00. Hi was all Rachel could utter, not knowing how to act. The stranger's smile turned venomous. She looked at Rachel with a hatred that made her uncomfortable. She didn't want to leave, though something in her gut told her it was the best thing to do. You know, maybe he just needed to get a high from our fight to feel like a winner. But you're not needed now, so go back where he got you from. Sorry, sweetheart, but you're not his type. Rachel had absolutely no idea what was going on. She stared silently at the stranger who looked around. "I see your stuff isn't here at all. Well, that's fine. You won't be needing them. It's a shame you've become just a toy in Ben's hands. Honestly, I didn't expect that from him." She smiled smugly. "Since he took such a desperate step, it means he cares about me." After looking around a bit, she realized where she was. Her phone had a couple percent charge left, but it was enough to call someone she knew. A few minutes later, she got into a black sports car. Taking one last look back at the place where she felt safe and good, Rachel drove home and caught an unpleasant sight. Rachel was about to leave, but turned around and added, "You better keep an eye on your boyfriend, or next time I'll take him away for good." She took her keys and walked out. Already on the street, Rachel realized that taking the keys was unnecessary, since she wasn't planning on coming back. Rachel smiled, noticing the confusion and displeasure on the stranger's face. "By the way, honey, your boyfriend has become a backup for me. I was bored at night and decided to have a good time with someone handsome. And I did. But your boyfriend caught my eye. He looked so miserable, like he'd never had a girlfriend." Looking carefully at the arrogant girl, Rachel said confidently, "You know, your boyfriend said that I was his best girlfriend, the kind of pleasure he's never had with anyone. So I suggest you work on your skills. Otherwise, people like me will take your boyfriend." Rachel stared fearfully at the man, not realizing if he was telling the truth or just trying to intimidate her. After a few seconds of thought, she decided not to give up. Rachel tried to pass, but the man grabbed her arm roughly. "Mom and I had plans for tonight, and you're not going to ruin them. Go for a walk, don't come back until morning." The man grinned, looking at the girl's confusion, and added, "If you don't like something, I can call my friends and they'll come up with something for you to do until morning. Just learn to respect your elders and keep your mouth shut when you're not required to talk." "That's too long a tongue for such a young girl." "What do you want?" he asked gruffly, not allowing the girl to pass. "Mother is asleep, you mustn't wake her." "Let me go, I want to go into my own house. You have no right to keep me out. You're nobody here at all." An unfamiliar man with almost no clothes on was strutting around the room. She called out to her mother, but there was silence in response. A few seconds later, as Rachel was about to enter, the man stood in front of her. Rachel walked slowly along the street. She had managed to grab her backpack and was looking at her phone, choosing where to go. She didn't look around or pay attention to the noise around her, and very much for nothing. Suddenly, her phone rang. She picked up the phone and heard a familiar voice, but for the first few seconds she couldn't recognize who was calling her. To the girl's great surprise, her mother's suitor never approached her again or said anything. For a moment it seemed to Rachel that he was not at home, but the next second a noise in the back of the house said otherwise. On her way out, she heard a man talking to someone on the phone, but she didn't pay any attention to it, and just a few seconds of careful listening could have changed her life for the better. Rachel walked quickly past the man, taking advantage of his confusion. She realized that this reaction wouldn't last long, so she needed to go take a shower as soon as possible, grab her things, and leave the house again. But if she had known that her words already had serious consequences and things wouldn't turn out to be so harmless, perhaps she wouldn't have gone into the house and talked to her mother's suitor. "Who the hell are you to talk to me like that?" she exclaimed. "Another random man of my mom's that she's going to replace in a few days with a new one. You're nobody here, and you have no right to threaten me. So let me in the house before I call the police. Otherwise, your friends will have to deal with your problems." I could hear in his voice that something was wrong. It seemed somehow strained compared to the guy's normal voice. It made Rachel feel uneasy. But immediately images of everything that had happened a couple hours ago popped into her head. She couldn't stay calm. "It's Ben. You stayed overnight at my place tonight. If you remember that, of course, I left you a note. And what was my surprise when I opened the apartment and realized you hadn't waited for me? To be honest, I was sure I'd see you again today." The voice was silent. Rachel tried to figure out where she'd heard it. The man in the phone apparently realized the girl's confusion and hurried to answer. "Hi." She heard a pleasant male voice in the receiver. "I'm sorry we never got to see each other." "I don't think that's a problem. We'll see each other again." "Why did you call me?" she asked Ben snidely. "Did your girlfriend give you permission to do that? And how did you even get my phone number?" "I didn't leave it for you when your lady kicked me out of your apartment. You know, at the time I really thought you were a nice guy who was willing to help me out. But no, you turned out to be just as deceitful and hypocritical as everyone I know, telling me you had no one. And in the end, your girlfriend just kicked me out the door as soon as I woke up. And don't try to pretend you don't have her." And she opened the door with her own keys. "So I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure we're not going anywhere." Rachel hated people who lied the first time they met. That was really low. She was about to hang up when she heard a phrase that made her hesitate to make such a drastic decision. "She's my ex-girlfriend, Ben," said the phrase so quickly that Rachel wasn't even sure if she'd heard him correctly. Putting the phone back to her ear, she asked less irritably, "What did you just say? Are you sure she's your ex-girlfriend?" Because she was acting like a full-fledged landlady today. "Of course I'm sure. She just can't accept the fact that I dumped her. But I had a pretty good reason, so I'm sure I'm right. I'm not going back to her, no matter what she may have said to herself. By the way, what did you say before you left?" "She told me some bullshit that I cheated on her, too. And now we're even, that she knows what I did last night and all that. I didn't understand anything, so I thought I'd check with you." Rachel suddenly remembered all that she had managed to say to the stranger at the moment when she was leaving the apartment angry. Silence continued for a few seconds. The girl decided to simply change the subject of the conversation so as not to answer the questions. "Do you still have it?" Something suspiciously quiet in the background, or not anymore. "Yes, I still have her. She had some problems with her parents and she asked me to listen to her. So I let her stay here. If you want, you can come over any time. I'd be happy to see you. You can lie on my bed and I'll lie on the floor. I saw that you took your keys with you. I must admit, I was glad you did. Ashley won't say anything else to you or insult you in any way. I'm sorry about her behavior. She can get a little testy. Don't worry, I won't bother you. I'll find a place to stay tonight. Besides, I have plans tonight, so you don't have to worry about me. I won't miss you." Rachel smirked smugly enough for Ben to hear it. The boy sighed and mouthed, "What are you talking about? I told you I'd be happy to see you. So you don't even have to think about disturbing anyone. Just show up if you want to." "Okay, I'll be very glad." Rachel wanted to answer something, but did not have time to do it. A car stopped abruptly near the girl and several men ran out of it. They were dressed in black. On their faces were strange masks that gave her goosebumps. Rachel froze in bewilderment for a second, and then tried to run away, but it was too late. One of the men sharply grabbed the girl's arm, stopping her on the spot and turning her sharply to himself. "Let go. Who are you? What's going on here?" Rachel threw herself in the man's arms and tried with all her might to break free of his grip, but she couldn't. Her eyes began to darken. The pain made it harder to breathe with each passing second. Her heart was pounding frantically in her temples, her pulse quickening. The last thing she heard before she passed out was Ben's worried voice on the phone. "Rachel. Rachel, what's wrong? Where are you? Who's there with you? Answer me already. What's wrong? I'm coming to you right now, Rachel. After that, just silence and darkness. She felt like she was roughly placed on something hard. It was cramped, hard to breathe. There were all sorts of unpleasant, pungent odors around that made her feel sick. The girl finally fell into oblivion, not realizing what was happening to her and who she had managed to mess up so badly. Rachel did not know how much time had passed before she woke up. She smelled damp and something else unpleasant. Rachel sank to the floor, covering her head with her hands and looking at the empty wall in front of her. Several hours passed like that in complete silence and darkness. It seemed to her that it could go on forever, when suddenly she heard the sound of keys turning in the lock. Turning around quickly, she stared intently at the door, not realizing what awaited her. She looked around and realized that she was either in a basement or some abandoned room that had no windows at all. To her great surprise, she wasn't tied up, just lying on some obscure rag right on the floor. Her head ached unbearably. She could barely get to her feet, struggling through the pain and fatigue. Her head was buzzing and spinning, and it was dark all around, but her eyes quickly adjusted to the darkness. Looking around once more, Rachel realized that the only way out was through the door that was right in front of her. She walked over to it and pulled the door handle. It was closed, which didn't surprise her at all. The man walked over and sat down in the only chair that was located in the center of the room. The door remained open, and Rachel glanced in its direction, assessing the chances of escape. Her legs felt like absorbent cotton, and she realized that hiding would be difficult. Well, how cozy are you here, don't you think? A few seconds later, a complete stranger appeared on the threshold. He gave the girl a displeased look and spoke in a menacing voice, stopping not far from her. That's right, little girl, you've done nothing to me, but you've hurt my friend. You ought to think before you say a big word to someone much older and stronger than you. He didn't touch you out of respect for your mother. But that's not the story with us. He didn't ask to kidnap you just to teach you a lesson. But I thought it would teach you a better lesson this way. Don't you think so? It'll be much more effective, and you'll definitely learn something from our conversation. Where am I and who are you? I haven't done anything to you, Rachel said in a whisper, but the man heard her. Don't even think you can escape. The man's voice confirmed her thoughts. Remember that my men are everywhere. If you make the slightest attempt to escape, it won't end well. It'll only get worse, and no one will ever be nice to you again. What was I brought here for? Why this place? And what will they do with me? You do realize that my mother will be looking for me, right? And I have friends who'll be worried about me. I think they'll start looking for me soon, and sooner or later they'll realize where I am. The man continued to sit on the chair, not approaching the girl, but scrutinized her carefully, lingering his gaze on certain places, as if he was trying to memorize the girl as best he could to easily identify her in the crowd. A few minutes passed, and the silence began to strain Rachel. She fidgeted in her seat, hesitant to say anything, but things were getting tense, and she decided to ask. Rachel already had a picture in her mind of what had happened. She realized that she would not be able to escape so easily, so she sank to the floor, listening attentively to what she was told. She wanted to gather her strength in case she needed it. So she decided not to waste them on pointless walking. The moment her body touched the cool floor, it felt much easier. She looked at the man with interest and fear, not even realizing what lay ahead of her. Rachel looked at the man with some concern. She realized that something was wrong. After a few seconds, her fears were confirmed. Sweetie, by the time they start looking for you, we won't be here. We'll let you go in the morning, once we've taught you a lesson about how to behave with your elders. The girl tried to make her voice as confident as possible, but it kept shaking. She was really scared, wanted to cry, but she restrained herself from showing weakness in front of her captor. The man smiled, and that smile sent an unpleasant chill through Rachel's body. She tried to hide from his gaze, but there was nowhere to do it, and a feeling of hopelessness swept over her. She frantically pondered what to do as she sat under her captor's gaze. It got scary. You know, I have a nice apartment not far from here. You could sleep on a soft bed instead of a hard floor. Your body wouldn't have to experience an uncomfortable position and get rid of the unpleasant odors that bother you. You're going to love it at my place. We'll have a good time while your mom will have a great time too. You won't bother her, and you'll realize that sometimes people need some alone time to get to know each other better. Do you understand?" The man leaned over to her and, looking at her intently, said. The man's smile became like a grin, and Rachel was even more afraid. She looked around, trying to quickly think of an escape plan, but there wasn't a single thought in her head. "No, honey, you don't have a choice. You had a choice to be mean to my friend or not, and you made the wrong decision. Now I'm making all the choices for you, and you're just watching the consequences of your actions. You're gonna love it, don't worry. I'm sure you're not the first. Just enjoy it and don't fight it. You don't have any other choice anyway. And if I don't want to go to your apartment, what then?" "Do I have a choice?" Rachel asked. "It's all right, I'll be gentle with you. You don't have to worry about that. You're not the first one. I've had no experience with men, and no one has ever complained. It's a good thing you told me that, because we don't have much time to take things slow and careful. We need to get out right now, or we won't have time for anything." She thought her captor's eyes flashed something strange, like incomprehension or sympathy. But in the next second, the man's gaze was as serious as it had been at the beginning of the conversation. "I don't have anyone. I wouldn't want it to happen like this. Besides, I'm only 17. This could end badly for you," Rachel said. "What the hell are you doing, you stupid girl? I wanted to treat you nicely and you do this, and you think I'm going to try to treat you humanly now. You don't deserve that kind of treatment." A second later came the irritated voice of a man who was clearly not happy with the development. He shouted so loudly that Rachel thought everyone around her could hear his irritated shout filled with rage. The man started to rise from his seat, and at that moment Rachel realized that she had almost no time left to save herself. There was no time to think about a plan, and she just jumped up to run out of the room. She was about to run forward when she suddenly realized that she could shut the man down. Abruptly rushing towards the door, she tried her best to close it with all her might. At that moment, when there were only a couple of centimeters left, she felt a sharp resistance. The adrenaline was so strong that the girl abruptly felt a surge of strength that allowed her to close the door. She turned the key in the lock sharply. She only stopped when she ran into another room with no exit. There was one small window, from which the sunlight shone dimly. It was covered with a strange film that looked dirty, as if it had lived several lives. Rachel ran down the hallway, not knowing where she was going or what was going on. She was running out of energy, her breath was getting short, but she couldn't stop. She could hear strange noises coming from everywhere, and it made her uneasy. For a moment it seemed as if someone was running after her. But after a few seconds all the sounds died down. The man continued to yell something, but Rachel didn't hear it. But that didn't make getting out so easy. Rachel felt a jerk backwards and the sharp pain of falling to the concrete floor. When she tried to get up, the stranger sharply pinned her with his foot. She groaned pitifully, feeling her eyes go dark again, but she couldn't let herself black out. Freedom was so close. After a few seconds, the girl heard heavy breathing behind her. At that moment, the last layer of the film gave way. The sunlight hit her eyes, but she couldn't delay, and she rushed outside, without turning around, realizing it was a stupid waste of time. As Rachel thought about what to do, footsteps were heard from behind. Panic came over her head. The girl quickly thought of ways to get out of the situation. The footsteps were getting closer, but nothing good came to mind. Then she rushed to the window and furiously tore the film, trying to get out into the street. Behind one layer was a second, a third. It was not easy to tear them, though the material seemed sticky. He smiled, looking at the girl who was almost unconscious, but then his face turned serious. "It's a good thing you ended up here, though. I caught you the moment you almost ran away, and Justin's going to love it. Maybe I'll even get promoted." "How did you get out of the cell, Rachel?" said the man with hatred, smiling smugly and pressing the girl down harder so she couldn't get up. He crouched down next to her and spoke in a cheerful voice. "What did you do to him, bitch? He couldn't just let you go. And since you're here alone and trying to escape, that means it didn't go according to his plan. What the hell is going on?" There was a look of apprehension in his eyes that didn't bode well. After a few seconds, the face became even more displeased. Leaning over, the man said, "What have you done with Alex? Why isn't he with you? How could you leave him so easily? He decided your fate and didn't let us even lay a finger on you. We didn't have to be so nice to the others." At that moment, a strange rustling sound reached her hearing, which made her open her eyes. The man, who had been sitting above her until a few seconds ago, went to the door to see what the noise was outside the room. He obviously thought that the girl had just passed out from pain and fatigue, and so he didn't attend to her ceremoniously or follow her, just leaving her alone for a while. This was his major mistake and the only chance for Rachel to save herself. Suddenly, there was a sharp noise from the door, which distracted the man. Rachel closed her eyes, feeling that her strength was almost gone, and that in a few seconds she would lose consciousness. Her voice trailed off into a scream, and Rachel squirmed involuntarily. It seemed she was in an even worse situation, and there was no chance of escape. Her strength was failing her, and she felt that she was about to lose consciousness, but she held on with all her might, for then she would not be able to escape from the clutches of her captors. When she turned around, she saw the angry face of a man who had also attempted to climb out the window. His attempt was unsuccessful. In this situation, the girl's fragility played to her advantage, for her captors would not have been able to get through the window she had chosen. Rachel did not think of anything better than to start swinging her free leg, lunging backward from the last strength, hoping that the man would not have time to grab her and would get a blow, from which he would let her go. And so it happened that at one moment the girl felt that she had hit the man, and made a few more strikes as strong as possible, which took almost all her strength. Hope had almost left her. Suddenly the girl felt complete freedom of movement. She jerked her legs out of the narrow window, crawled out and moved forward. Tears of pain and helplessness ran down her cheeks. But she tried to hold on, tried not to give in to her emotions, for she was still not safe. At the moment when the man disappeared behind the door, she jerked up sharply, climbed faster through the small window, which seemed to her absolutely tiny. The girl was almost out, grabbing the grass strenuously and climbing out with all her might. Suddenly she felt strong fingers grabbing her ankle. Another rush of adrenaline helped her, giving her strength when she had none left. The girl continued to get forward by millimeters as she felt a sudden jerk back. Her leg ached painfully, which made her shrink. But she didn't let go of the life-saving grass that helped her stay on the street. Rachel saw the man quickly disappear into the darkness of the room and realized that she could not delay. She climbed to her feet and took a few steps, feeling that many of her limbs were not obeying at all. Suddenly a noise was heard somewhere outside. Creepy thoughts and pictures began to appear in her head, which could become quite real future of the girl. She added a step, squeezing out the last of her strength, just to avoid being in the hands of those who kidnapped her. Do not even think that you so easily managed to hide from me. I know this place like the back of my hand. If you try to leave, I'll be right behind you. And for what you've done, you're going to get a special punishment, bitch. Lowering her head on the cool grass, the girl exhaled convulsively, realizing that she had managed to escape. But it was too early to rejoice, for the man shouted irritably. Rachel passed out. The girl woke up at the moment when the sun was already shining. Looking up, she suddenly remembered where she was and what had happened. Tears involuntarily ran down her cheeks, leaving hot paths. Looking around herself, Rachel noticed that her knees were badly shattered, and there were dozens of small scratches on her arms and legs that were incredibly uncomfortable. Fear and despair were overwhelming her. It was necessary to get out. During the next fall, she still couldn't get up. Her legs were no longer obeying her, but her arms as well, treacherously trembling at any attempt to prop herself up and get up. Rachel sank down on the thick grass, feeling that she could do nothing more. She found herself completely helpless, lost and defenseless. She didn't know if her captors would be able to find her, but she realized there was nothing more she could do. Her heart was beating frantically in her chest. Her eyelids were getting heavy, and she was unable to resist the accumulated fatigue. A few minutes later, she found herself in a dense thicket that seemed endless. She didn't know how much time had passed. When her legs began to wobble, she could not take a single step steady. And after a few dozen minutes, she just started falling, smashing her knees every few steps. But Rachel didn't give up. She still felt threatened and realized that she couldn't be safe so quickly. And so she was glad to rest for a while, squeezing the last of the juices out of her body. She continued to get up and take a few more steps until she fell back to the ground. There was no choice. She went to the first house she could find, hoping to get at least a night's lodging. Knocking on the door, Rachel waited for a few minutes for an answer. Just when she thought no one was going to open the door, she heard some movement inside. She knocked again, only more insistently. And in a few seconds the door opened. On the threshold stood an elderly woman who looked at Rachel with displeasure. She ran her gaze over the girl, then said with displeasure, The girl slowly moved in the direction she had been trying so hard to get to until she fell unconscious. She was sure that if she walked very long, she would sooner or later come to some settlement or highway where she could ask for help. But fortunately, the girl did not have to go far. After half an hour, she came to several houses which stood on the outskirts of the village. Rachel realized that she was either outside the city or on the very edge of it. And this area was not at all familiar to her. Trying to get up, the girl thought she had twisted her leg in another fall. But as she lifted her pant leg, she saw a bruise from the hand that was clutching it. It became eerie as she tried to flee. She hastily looked around to make sure the sounds hadn't attracted any unnecessary attention. Rachel sighed convulsively and made another attempt to get up. It was dangerous to stay in this place, so she had to get out as soon as possible. Besides, it wouldn't be as safe to sleep in the thicket at night as it was during the day. "I'm sorry to bother you at this hour. I just wanted to ask you to take me in for the night. I'm in a very unpleasant situation. I have nowhere to go and no cell phone to call a cab. Maybe I could spend the night. And then in the morning I could figure out what to do next. Or could you at least call me a cab? I'll be sure to wire you the money as soon as I get home. Even more than you'll pay." There was so much displeasure and anger in the woman's gaze that Rachel felt uncomfortable. But the girl had no choice, and so she answered, "What are you doing at my house anyway? Why did you come?" The girl looked around, noting that all the houses were old, and some were almost falling apart. It was getting a little uncomfortable, but there was no energy left to get to the next place. After gathering her thoughts and trying to calm down, Rachel went to the next house, hoping that at least one person would be helpful. "Get out of here. We don't have anyone here to help you. And if anyone invites you in, you'll be in trouble," the woman said, and closed the door sharply in Rachel's face. After a few seconds, everything was quiet again. Tears were running down the girl's cheeks. She couldn't control herself, no matter how hard she tried. Her pain was visible to the naked eye, but it had absolutely no effect on the stranger. Rachel once again thought about what could go wrong. Unpleasant images flashed through her mind. But then she looked at the man again and continued, "I apologize, I understand how this looks. And I realize I've come quite late, and you don't have to help me because you don't know me. But she'd better take the woman's advice and spend the night somewhere else." Rachel knocked on the door of the next house. This time the door opened almost immediately, as if the owner had known she was coming. On the doorstep was a tall man who didn't inspire confidence at all. Rachel was about to leave, but the realization that there might not be anyone at all in the other houses made her stay put. She looked at the man hopefully, a lump in her throat, and said, "Where are you going at this hour? I don't think any cab driver would be willing to drive to us now. Besides, the road is bad, even in daylight. And at night it's almost impossible to get through without breaking down. Stay the night, and I'll call you a cab in the morning." Rachel looked hopefully at the stranger, who seemed both sullen and attractive. For a few seconds, the owner of the dilapidated cabin was silent, and then he said thoughtfully, "Would you mind letting me spend the night at your house? I need somewhere to spend the night, and I'll be traveling onward in the morning. Or, if you wouldn't mind, could you call me a cab? I'll pay for it when I get home. Or my friend will pay when he meets me. I'm in a bad situation. I just don't have anywhere else to go, and I don't know where I am. I'm sure I won't find my way back at night." A few tense seconds of silence passed, when suddenly the man spoke in a low, hoarse voice. Rachel entered a small, dark room with only a dim lamp burning. She looked around and noticed that the house was clearly in need of major repairs. But at least there was a roof over her head, and it wasn't as scary as it was outside. The girl turned around and saw that the man was watching her intently. He seemed to be literally devouring her with his eyes, which made her uncomfortable. The man stepped aside, letting Rachel into his house. The girl hesitated for a few seconds, but decided to go in. She simply had no other choice, because staying outside was even worse. But had she known what awaited her? Perhaps she would have preferred to spend the night on the grass and not go into the stranger's house. The landlord walked to another dark room and returned to Rachel a few seconds later with 2 mugs. They were dirty, with marks from past tea parties and small cracks in the bottoms. It was obvious that a woman's hand was clearly missing from the house. At that moment, Rachel remembered Ben, whose apartment was always in perfect order. Something clenched in her chest. She remembered how their conversation had ended abruptly, and realized that the guy must be distraught after everything that had happened. Rachel nodded uncertainly, feeling the fear rising again. Some strange premonition kept her from relaxing. She kept looking around, as if she sensed that at any moment something could go wrong. "I'll put the tea on. Will you have some?" "I haven't had a woman in a long time." "Take off your clothes." At the moment when Rachel took the last sip of tea and put the empty mug on the table, she noticed that the man's gaze had changed dramatically. It became predatory, clearly not boding well. After a few seconds, the master of the house rose abruptly from his seat, removing everything from the table. And after returning, he said in a serious, commanding voice. The man poured tea into mugs, scrutinizing the stranger. It seemed that he was literally devouring her with his eyes. But the girl tried not to show that something was wrong. In her head, she was running through different variants of the situation. But she could not predict what would happen next. The man turned to leave for the other room, but heard the girl's frightened, trembling voice. "What are you frozen? Didn't you hear that? I say I haven't had a woman for a long time. Now you will replace her in my house. Take off your clothes, I'm waiting." These words sounded not like a request, but like a direct order that could not be disobeyed. The girl froze in place, not realizing what to do. But after a couple of seconds, the man repeated in an even more irritated voice. "I do not need your money. I do not need them here. But I need a woman." Tears stood in the girl's eyes, but she struggled to hold them back, afraid of the man's inadequate reaction. The landlord slowly turned toward her and spoke. "Are you sure I have to do this? I wouldn't want to pay for a night's lodging and your kindness like that. Perhaps I'd better leave right now? I'll be sure to wire you the money for the tea as soon as I get home, or let me go, please." The man muttered something to himself as he went off into another room. And a stunned Rachel stared at the large white t-shirt thrown to her. "You can wash up in the room on the left. There's a small bench and a bucket of water. It's not warm, of course, but it'll do for you. Get all that dirt off you. It's disgusting to look at you." He pulled something out of the closet and tossed it toward the girl. "How long are you going to sit there? The longer you delay doing your duties, the later I'll let you go, not until you've paid in full for the night's lodging. Maybe you won't even count on getting rid of me at all. I won't sleep a wink until then." After a while, the man knocked sharply on the closed door, causing it to rattle and almost break under his pressure. After a few minutes, she did go to the bathroom, having no idea what was in store for her next. Rachel tried to stay in this confined room as long as possible. She even thought about staying there until morning, but the door didn't inspire confidence at all. "What will I need to do to repay you for your hospitality?" Rachel asked quietly, not even wanting an answer. Rachel, a young girl, opened the door and was horrified to find an angry Justin standing just a meter away, watching her every move intently. Sighing heavily, she walked to the center of the room and sat down in her original seat. The man's voice sounded irritated, and Rachel, sighing convulsively, decided to leave the room. There were no windows in it, no crevices through which to escape. Until the wee hours of the morning, Justin savored her voice. Rachel tried to repay the man as soon as possible. When the first rays of sunlight appeared in the sky, she heard her master's satisfied voice. "To fulfill my direct feminine duties to a man. What else is there to do? Don't worry, I'll show and explain everything to you. But I won't help you." Justin grinned and spoke contentedly. "My buddy will take you to any address you say. He was just on his way into town, so there's no need to pay him, but behave yourself in his car. His wife doesn't like stuck-up girls." Turning to Justin, the girl saw a smug smirk that imprinted itself on her memory for a long time. Her whole body was shivering with incredible fatigue. But she didn't want to sleep. She simply couldn't afford to close her eyes in the house of the man who had abused her so cruelly. "Well, I think you've had enough. Why don't you come home now?" The girl flinched and said a quick hello, lowering her eyes to the floor. "And why are you silent? Have you swallowed your tongue? What disgusting young people," grudgingly muttered the woman, continuing to stare at Rachel. A few minutes later, an older car pulled up to the house. Rachel felt like she didn't want to get in it. She didn't want to rely on chance anymore, but there was no choice. There was an unpleasant odor of sweat and smoke in the cabin, from which the girl instantly began to feel sick. But she pulled herself together to calm down and regain her breath. Opening her eyes, she noticed the focused gazes of a man and a woman who looked shabby and scrutinized her closely. Rachel stepped out wearing the t-shirt the homeowner had given her. Not wanting to stay in that house a minute longer, She frantically waited to see what would happen next in the car. The drive passed in silence. The man and woman in the front seats were talking to each other, and Rachel silently watched the road. For a moment she thought she recognized these places and began to distinguish the outlines of her hometown. But after a few minutes the car turned onto a country road that went into the woods. She gave Ben's address, which somehow, in some unbelievable way, popped into her memory. Rachel didn't want to go home without knowing what was waiting for her there, so she decided to go to his place, hoping that the guy would be home. "And where do you want to be this early? And how did you even end up in his house?" the woman persisted, speaking with such hatred that Rachel felt as if she owed something to these people, even though she hadn't gotten any help yet. The girl remained silent. She didn't want to create conflict, but the feeling that things weren't going according to plan wouldn't leave her. It was scary to realize that she had absolutely no idea where she was and what was going to happen to her. But despite her fears and worries, she was indeed driven to a familiar house. After thanking her and walking outside, she lingered outside the entryway for a few seconds, hesitant to enter. "What are you so worried about? We know all these roads like the back of our hand," Rachel replied irritably. "We just decided to take a shortcut and get to the address you mentioned faster." "Where are we going?" "I think we took a wrong turn," Rachel spasmodically muttered, looking intently at the man behind the wheel. A few seconds later, she heard the sound of a key turning. At the moment when she wanted to rush into her arms, she noticed that it was Ashley, not Ben, who opened the door. Ashley was staring hatefully at Rachel, who was crying. Rachel didn't answer anything, only hurriedly stepped into the entryway, going up to Ben's floor. Her heart was beating frantically in her chest. Hot tears were already rolling down her cheeks, and it seemed that now everything would be fine. Now all the trials were over. The girl knocked on the door, hoping to see the guy she was so eager to see. "We brought you somewhere wrong. Or did you change your mind about coming home? Can we take you back with us?" She awoke to a tentative touch on her head that made her wince. Despite the tenderness Ben was trying to put into his touch, Rachel was quite startled. It seemed to her that now she would be afraid of everything around her for years to come. Ashley closed the door abruptly, not giving Rachel the slightest chance to get a word in edgewise. Something inside made Rachel stay where she was. She slowly slid down the wall, bracing her legs and begging for the guy to come home as soon as possible. She didn't know how much time had passed. At some point, Rachel just fell asleep on the cold floor in just a t-shirt, shivering with every breeze. Her mind had fallen into a despondency she just couldn't resist. "I didn't make myself clear last time," Ashley said. "I told you to go away and not come back here. Ben and I are fine, and I don't need anything else. Find another guy who will dance to your tune and do whatever you say. Get away from my boyfriend." "Did you knock on the door?" the boy asked. But Rachel didn't answer. She threw herself on her boyfriend's neck, feeling safe at last. She sobbed with her whole body, unable to calm down. "What happened to you?" Ben whispered. The girl nodded, but this time less confidently, not realizing the situation she was in. "And they didn't let you in?" Rachel nodded. "I thought we were going to spend this evening together. I bought some nice lingerie." The guy gently lifted Rachel up, opening the door to the apartment. Ashley greeted him with a smile that immediately disappeared when she saw Rachel. Glaring angrily at her guest, she muttered, "If I'm in your way, I can just leave. I'll find a place to go." Rachel struggled, and her words turned into uncontrollable sobs again. She clung to Ben with her whole body, trying to find warmth and support in his arms. "Get out of my apartment right now," Ben yelled. "It's not what you thought," Ashley protested. "I just didn't realize she needed help. She just knocked on the door and didn't say anything." "And get out of my apartment." Ben growled angrily, not letting his ex-girlfriend finish. "Pack your things, take a cab. And God forbid I ever see you again. You'll be in trouble, I promise. And I was a fool to think you'd really changed. It's a great show." He looked at Ashley again. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you might be afraid of loud noises right now. It's okay." Which made Rachel cringe, trying to get away from the loud sound. He recovered immediately, stroking the girl's hair gently and saying. Ben gently sat Rachel down on the couch, covered her with a blanket, and spoke suppressedly. Ashley quickly gathered her things and ran out of the apartment without saying anything. The guy's face was so furious that she realized any arguments could end badly for her. Now, Should Rachel have insisted that woman call her a cab, or should she have gone to another house to get a cab to Justin's house? He didn't want to pressure the girl, but the desire to help her was stronger. After a few seconds of silence, the girl began to tell him what had happened. Ben listened attentively, not interrupting her and only occasionally squeezing her hand, letting her know that everything would be all right. After the girl finished her story, he exhaled convulsively, trying to control his emotions. "Tell me what happened." She exhaled, feeling her whole body ache. "Don't you see? I had no choice," Rachel said, looking at her best friend. "I didn't want to bother you. You still had Ashley. So I had to go to him. Why did you stay at that man's house if you felt threatened?" The guy's voice was crushed. "I'm sorry," Ben whispered, stroking the girl. "I had no idea that one misunderstanding would have such consequences. You weren't distracting me at all. Ashley. She thinks too highly of herself, and I tried to help her, to show her that other people are just as good as she is. I tried, but I realized too late that she was hopeless, and I hurt her because of it. And I won't forgive myself for that." Turning on her side, she closed her eyes, trying to sleep, but the smug face of the man she'd been with that night kept popping up again and again. "If I'd known this was going to happen, I would have stayed outside." Ex-girlfriend Ben corrected. "Talk to her. It's not your fault what happened. You don't have to help me at all. You've only known me for a day. I came into your life out of the blue, and I shouldn't have been rude to your girlfriend." Rachel looked at the boy incomprehensibly. Ben closed his eyes, trying to cope with his emotions. "You know, between her and you, I would have picked you. The moment you shared your story with me, the moment you told me what you were going through, I didn't just want to help you. I felt like I wanted to get you out of all this trouble. I wanted to be there for you to make your life just a little bit better. I wanted you to wait for me at the apartment so that we could solve all the troubles that had arisen in your life together. I wanted to protect you from more problems, and I ended up causing them." Rachel just sighed heavily. Rachel stayed at Ben's house. The girl graduated from high school, and after the couple got married, she no longer returned to her native Wisconsin and completely severed all relations with her mother. Now it was time for real happiness in her life, the very one for which she was ready to endure all those terrible trials that fell on her fate. Ben looked at Rachel in such a way that she didn't doubt the truth of his words for a second. "Forgive me if you can," he was silent for a moment, wondering if he should go on, but it seemed to him that there might not be another opportunity. "You know, I want to protect you from all this trouble in the future. I want you to be happy under my wing. I fell in love with you at first sight the moment I saw your eyes that night. And in that day I realized that I couldn't lose you that easily." Alex accompanied the girl home after receiving her certificate. The young people walked in cheerfully, carefreely discussed how they would soon go to enroll in a big city. And finally they will make friends on their own, where there will be no parental care and moralizing. Alex began dating Elizabeth in the 10th grade, and at present their couple was already considered a future unit of society. The young people did not deny this. As soon as they became adults, they would immediately go to legalize their relationship. And now there was just a little more wait left for this event. And now the couple walked and dreamed that their wishes would come true. Elizabeth held the young man's hand and happily said that they would succeed. Alex nodded in response, and then the girl suddenly said, "You and I have outlined everything in detail. What if one of us doesn't get in?" "So what then?" "I'll join the army so as not to waste time." "But you decided it correctly. And if I don't do it, then I will have to return to my parents, and we will live separately. I don't want this. If you don't act like me, you'll still stay with me. Get a job as a salesperson for a year, and try again. You and I will not be separated." Soon the guy saw the girl off and went home. He knew that now there would be another brainstorming session with his father. Kirill was categorically against his son entering an economics institute. And the man repeatedly told Alex about this, that the profession of a financier is not valued in the village. The young man came home and sighed with relief. "My father worked in the garden." The guy went into the room he shared with his younger brother Ted. Alex looked at the unmade beds and mentally cursed. This morning it was my brother's turn to make the beds. And then the guy thought that Volodya should be given a good scolding for such tricks. Just these thoughts came to Alex's head when he heard his father come into the house, followed by Ted. The head of the family decorously walked into the nursery to talk with his son. and as soon as he entered, he immediately frowned when he saw that the beds were not made. The man looked sternly at Alex and said quietly, "What kind of bedlam is here?" "Good, there is no mother, otherwise both would have received what they deserved." "Father, today it's Vova's turn to make the beds. Moreover, he no longer studies." "Okay, sort out your responsibilities among yourselves. But I don't want to see this again. And now I didn't come for this. I want to talk to you again about the profession. I met with an acquaintance today. He said that they were going to build some kind of plant there. A friend told me that construction materials were also being delivered. So I would like to advise you to choose a rational specialty that will be in demand here." "Father, well, how many times will we raise this topic? Elizabeth and I decided everything. For that matter, the plant also needs financiers. This girl has fooled your brains and you, like a little calf, trail behind her. It is her privilege to become an economist. So let him study. Before you met her, you never even thought about being a financier. Elizabeth and her parents came here just 3 years ago. Dad, don't start. I don't want to argue with you on this topic. I still won't change my decision. Stupid. There's no point in talking to you. Let your mother influence you now." Sighing heavily, the head of the family said, waved his hand in disappointment, and left the room. As soon as his father left, Alex looked sternly at his brother, and then waved his fist and said, "This will happen again, be offended by yourself. I won't look at you that you're younger than me. And I'll give you blows. Otherwise, look, you're already getting into the habit of not fulfilling your duties." The guy was unlucky. He missed a few points. Alex was initially upset, as was his lover. The girl even wanted to invite her chosen one to pick up her documents from the institute and return home with the guy, but Alex immediately refused this, and then said, "There's nothing wrong with that. You go ahead, study, and I'll go to the army. A man must repay his debt to the motherland. And after service, try his luck again and try to go to college." Soon Alex and Elizabeth left to enroll in a regional city. The girl passed the exams with ease. If you have problems in your personal life, then don't blame it on a healthy one. Go ahead and ask your girlfriend what's going on. Don't forget that demobilization is coming soon. Alex listened to the words of the interlocutor, and the next time he called the girl, he did not ask her how she was doing and so on. The guy asked the question without any pretense. Alex went into the army. He tried to call Elizabeth as often as possible. The young man wanted to know how his beloved was doing, how her studies were going. The girl happily shared stories about her everyday life. This went on for about 7 months. And then Alex noticed that the chosen one began to answer more dryly and always tried to veil the conversation as quickly as possible. Alex was nervous after such calls. Various bad thoughts came to mind. The young man became irritable, which did not escape his colleagues. And when once again, after a conversation with Elizabeth, the guy dissatisfiedly turned off his mobile phone, and then involuntarily became rude to a soldier from his unit, which almost led to a fight, Alex was stopped, and one colleague told him, "Sorry. Yes, I have a man whom I love. He loves me too. I made an offer. I agreed. Don't be angry, but this happens in life. I know that I am bringing you pain now, but I cannot tell my heart to stop loving him. Did someone show up for you?" Alex nervously clutched his cell phone, waiting for an answer. He tried to hear the word yes, but Elizabeth was silent. Then the young man repeated his question more demandingly. And only after that he heard, "Just don't do anything stupid. You will meet another girl. Don't worry, everything's fine. I can only wish you happiness. I should have just told you everything right away, and not dragged my feet." "Don't worry, I won't bother you," Alex answered in a feignedly cheerful voice and immediately turned off the connection. After that, he threw the mobile phone onto the asphalt and stepped on it with his foot. A colleague saw this scene and advised him to call and find out the whole truth about the girl. The soldier hurried to Alex, patted him on the shoulder, and said seriously. A demobilization soon followed. Alex returned home. Elizabeth had already married by that time. Alex's parents also knew about this, and therefore, when their son came home from service, they tried not to touch upon this sensitive topic. However, my father was now more interested in whether he would go back to the institute where Elizabeth was studying. Therefore, Kirill, at a convenient moment, started a conversation with his son. "I'm not going to take my own life. I'll live happily. Thanks for the support. but I can handle it myself. Alex said dully, "Son, choose a profession to your liking, and not to please me. Just admit to yourself that at one time you wanted to become a financier only because of Elizabeth. Father, don't beat around the bush. I know what interests you. Let me calm you down. I am not going to enter the Economics Institute where Elizabeth studies. I actually want to go to another city where I'll choose a college, study to become a machine operator or something like that. Do you feel calmer now? Alex, what are you going to do next?" When time passed, Alex had a day off. He decided to take a walk and make himself a little holiday, namely sit, relax, and order himself a pizza. Alex did this extremely rarely. Still, finances were a bit difficult. And now a young man is sitting in a cafe, eating pizza and drinking cappuccino, when suddenly a girl sits down next to him with a smile and says, and he completely agreed with his father's words, since in fact he always wanted to be close to Elizabeth. Soon Alex entered college in a nearby city. He chose the profession of an electrical mechanic. The young man rented a room, and in order not to be completely financially dependent on his parents, he got a job unloading wagons in the evenings. Time slowly moved forward. Alex often remembered Elizabeth. He would really like to know how she is doing. Sometimes he even took a cell phone, dialed the girl's number from memory, but immediately turned off the cell phone. The young man dreamed that time would quickly make him forget the image of his beloved. He even met a girl for this purpose in order to start a new relationship. However, the communication lasted about 2 months, and the romance ended there. Only a year and a half later, Alex was able to recover from the breakup with Elizabeth. Maybe you are right. By the way, my name is Helen. Why ask when you are already comfortable? Help yourself to some pizza. I'm not a greedy person, I've already ordered it, they'll bring it now. You gobble up the baked goods with such gusto that I couldn't help but drool. Is it okay that you got hooked without permission? Did you want to call me to my conscience? Then I can say that you didn't succeed. My name is Alex. You just grabbed me by the horns like a bull, head on. You decided to take me in just like that. Right away, take me and get to know me. I always thought that the stronger sex enjoys this privilege of meeting girls first. Well, I'll have to obey you. Alex grinned when he heard his interlocutor's phrase and said, "Don't worry, everything is fine. It's better to tell us about yourself, who you are, what you do in life. In general, reveal your personality." Alex smiled after these words. Then he was silent for a while and then told about himself. Helen listened to the young man without interrupting. As soon as the guy fell silent, she thoughtfully said that they were completely different in nature. "Why are you so touchy? I didn't mean to offend you. Sorry if anything. You know how to amaze people. Why did you apply to the first institution you came across? What? You didn't have a dream. What do you want to be in the future?" "Please, I can tell you about myself. Nothing to me," the girl said with bravado and looked straight into Alex's eyes. She said that she came specifically to this city to enroll in the first educational institution she came across. This institution turned out to be a pedagogical college. After that, Helen looked with a grin at her interlocutor, who almost choked after the last words. Alex coughed a little and then said in surprise, "It's easy for you to talk like that. You know information about me, but I don't. Therefore, I cannot say so definitely. I studied in the 9th grade. I still can't forgive my father for betraying me. He tried to establish contact with me, but I told him not to appear in my life, otherwise I can't vouch for myself." "And how old were you when your father left the family?" "I used to want to be an actress. Just don't laugh. But after my dad fell in love with a mediocre actress and left the family, my desire suddenly disappeared. My dream of becoming a film star did not come later. And when I graduated from school, I still couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. And in order not to live on my mother's moral teachings, I chose a city further away. And so I came here." "Fine. You really won't get bored. I imagine. If you take after your mother's character, then what kind of person is she?" Alex said with a laugh. "You won't get bored with my mom. We must do everything as directed, and I'm tired of it. My mother, with her connections, could have gotten me into a pedagogical institute through connections, but I didn't want that. That's why I'm in this city, and not in my native one. But I'll repeat right away that I did this deliberately. Maybe we can change the topic now, otherwise it's getting boring." I understand that my father is offended. But why did you leave your mother? Is it really that bad? Could you go to college or institute in your city? Moreover, your homeland is not a provincial town, but a large metropolis. Alex said with bewilderment. Alex walked home in high spirits. He was thinking about a new acquaintance. He liked the girl, and he already imagined what kind of relationship they could have if they started communicating. As soon as Alex thought about it, he immediately mentally scolded himself that he shouldn't look ahead. The couple sat in the cafe for some time discussing everyday school life, and then Helen announced that she had to go. Alex volunteered to accompany us, and the girl agreed. Soon the young people were already standing in front of the Helen hostel. They talked for some time, and then exchanged phone numbers and parted. She and I are completely different, the girl answered seriously and looked straight at her interlocutor. I know I was delayed, but there were problems. You don't have to ask which ones, because I won't tell you. Better answer, did you place an order? Soon Alex was already sitting in a cafe, waiting for a girl who was 15 minutes late. The young man was worried that his new acquaintance might not come. He was about to call when he saw the girl enter. Alex waved at her with delight. The girl responded with the same gesture and hurried to the table. As soon as she approached, she immediately said. Alex called the girl the next day and offered to meet. Helen agreed and suggested we meet in the same cafe where we met. The young man was embarrassed and was silent for several moments, and then agreed. The only thing that confused him was that he would need money for gatherings in a cafe, but there was no extra money. But still, Alex accepted the girl's offer, thinking that he would save money on something later. After that, she returned to the table where Alex was sitting in bewilderment, who was again shocked by the behavior of his new acquaintance. Helen, seeing the bewilderment on the young man's face, immediately laughed and said, "That is great. Then today we will feast at my expense and eat what I prefer," the girl said with a smile, and then headed to the counter where she placed her order. "How can I place an order if I don't know what you prefer?" The couple sat in the cafe for some time, then decided to take a walk. They slowly wandered through the streets, talking about various topics. The young people didn't notice that they had been walking for a couple of hours. Helen was the first to notice that she was starting to blow her nose outside. The girl looked in amazement at the miniature watch on her hands and said in surprise, "Yes, I already understood that. Get used to my antics if you want to continue communicating with me. Of course, now you won't get rid of me so easily." "Moreover, I like communicating with you," the girl answered with a laugh and immediately dictated her phone number, after which Helen hurried to her place. Time slowly moved on. The young people often called each other and met whenever possible. Their relationship became closer every day. And just a month and a half after they met, Alex confessed his love to Helen. He expected reciprocal feelings from the girl, but his beloved again shocked him with her words, as the chosen one had done repeatedly during meetings. After declaring her love for Alex, she laughed and said slyly, "But we'll see each other again. This is what we talked about. We must separate. Should I tell you? What must I do for you to believe me?" The young man asked in bewilderment. "Do you think that after your glamorous words about feelings, my heart will immediately beat twice as hard? You're wrong, Romeo. Your words don't say anything to me, because it's air, but your actions don't. Think about it now. Don't be offended, you're just a weirdo. Girls are romantic people, and they want elevation. What did you do? He came and spoke about his feelings. That's all. And this is not enough. It is necessary, for example, to save a beloved from hooligans, and immediately after that present an engagement ring with a marriage proposal. And believe me, not a single girl will refuse such an offer." Alex was initially embarrassed after the question, and then shyly told what was bothering him. Michael listened carefully to his interlocutor, and as soon as he fell silent, he laughed. Alex did not expect such a reaction from his friend and frowned angrily. Michael, seeing that his comrade was offended, immediately became serious and said quietly. After this conversation with his beloved, Alex spent several days thinking about what needed to be done to make the girl believe in the sincerity of his feelings. But as luck would have it, no sensible thoughts came into his head. From these thoughts, the guy became a little withdrawn into himself. What did not hide from classmates, and one of the students, Michael, asked what was happening with Alex. A couple of days had passed. Helen was in a hurry to go on a date. She was a little surprised that Alex did not come that day, as he always did, but suggested meeting at a certain place. The girl had just to go through the arch when a guy jumped up to her and hugged her around the waist. Helen sharply pushed the stranger in the chest and quickly took out deodorant from her purse and sharply directed a stream of liquid into the hooligan's face. The bully, and it was Michael, hunched over, covering his face with his hands. This punishment was not enough for the girl, and she kicked the guy between the legs with a flourish, after which Helen began hitting the robber on the head with a deodorant can. She was stopped from these actions by Alex, who hugged his beloved and, laughing, said, Alex was discouraged after his classmate's proposal. The whole idea seemed stupid to him. However, Michael was so persistent and convincing that Alex agreed to this adventure. And then the friends discussed the plan of action and slapped each other's hands in a friendly manner. It's not a problem, Michael said, laughing. And then he became serious and continued talking. We will play an attack on your girlfriend, and I will become the hooligan myself. Buying a ring is not a problem. Well, where can I find these hooligans? Here Alex interrupted Michael, who finally stopped moaning in pain. The guy turned to the girl and said, Calm down, Helen. Michael is a great guy. Here, most likely I was an ass for agreeing to this adventure to save my beloved from the hands of a bully. I just had to save you at some point. But when I saw how you militantly defended your honor, you stopped dead in your tracks and stood in a daze. And a moment later he was laughing and rushing to the rescue. But not for you, but for Michael. Do you know him? Can you imagine? This scoundrel decided to pester me. You have good friends, it turns out. The girl said angrily and tried to hit the offender on the head again. Yes, you are a bully, Michael, just like I am a ballerina. And then Michael shook his fist at his classmate playfully, after which he apologized again and hurried to leave the couple. As soon as Michael left, Helen looked straight at Alex. The young man at the same moment explained why this whole staging was started. The girl, hearing the story, said in amazement, Let your boyfriend tell it, Michael answered. And then he turned to his friend. And you need to be warned that your chosen one is a militant Amazon. So you planned this. But what is all this for? Helen exclaimed. I'm sorry that this happened. I'm leaving. We'll figure it out on the spot. Helen, hearing these words from her mother, immediately sighed sadly. After which she informed the chosen one that now a huge test awaited them. Alex smiled in response and said that they would overcome all difficulties together. Anne's arrival was not long in coming. The woman arrived to her daughter 2 days later and immediately demanded to introduce her to her future son-in-law. After some time, the couple got married. They informed their relatives that the wedding would soon take place. Alex's parents received the news with joy and asked their son to introduce him to their future relative before the wedding. But Mother Helen, when she heard the news, immediately reacted differently. She neither congratulated the couple nor scolded them for their rash decision to start a family. Anne just said to her daughter, I agree to become your wife, but don't do such eccentricities again. Otherwise, all your friends will be seriously hurt. And you started all this to prove your feelings to me. You really are a wonderful person. After these words, Helen laughed and then hugged the guy and said, But these are normal maternal requirements. It's okay, we'll get everything over time. Listen, why doesn't your mom find herself a man? She is not an old pretty woman. Your conversation with my mother is just flowers. Before leaving, she told me that she would not leave you until you provided me with everything I needed. And she considers an apartment, a dacha, a car, and everything like that necessary. Helen, your mother is a real chieftain in a skirt. The only thing missing is a whip. Now I understand who your character is like. As soon as Helen's mother saw Alex, she interrogated him with passion. Anne, while asking questions, looked straight at the young man, thereby making him embarrassed. After 30 minutes of conversation with the woman, Alex was already dreaming that the conversation would end quickly. And when this happened, he said, Then you can keep the finances for yourself. We will take a loan and donated money for the wedding and purchase real estate. But we won't live next to you. Understand, I'm tired of your diligent care. I want independence. I may make mistakes, but they will be my mistakes, and I will sort them out. While you are studying, do you agree that you need to rent an apartment? But then, after completing your studies, move to live. I'll even give you money to buy an apartment. Although before this I told you, daughter, that this is the responsibility of your spouse. Some time passed, a wedding was held in Helen's homeland. Immediately after the wedding, the girl's mother started talking about purchasing an apartment. Helen told her mother that real estate would only be purchased in the city where she was attending college. Anne frowned at her daughter's words and said quietly, "And you need to ask her this, not me. I don't want to get into her soul with such questions." But then everything changed dramatically. Anne came to stay with them, and after the wedding she only called her daughter. The woman looked around the room in a businesslike manner, and then proceeded to the kitchen. She opened the refrigerator without any permission and immediately winced in disgust. Helen immediately realized that the teacher's conversation was about to begin, so she tried to get ahead of her mother and started talking about the first one. A month flew by at this pace. The married couple was a little tight financially, but neither of them complained to their relatives about it. They believed that they had to cope with difficulties on their own. However, another month passed, and the couple realized that some days they would not even have enough money to buy a loaf of bread. The married couple was looking for a way out of the situation. Helen was even thinking about finding a part-time job herself in the evening. He waited until his mother-in-law left the room, and only then asked what had happened. Helen spoke briefly and said that she was leaving tomorrow. Soon the newlyweds left for the city. The couple rented a one-room apartment at their place of study. They continued their studies in college. In the evenings, Alex went to work part-time, and at that time his wife was at home and thought of something funny to please her husband. "Well, I won't try to convince you otherwise. If you want independence, then live, and I'll see how you survive on your meager scholarships," Anne said to her daughter. And then she turned around as her son-in-law entered the room. The woman looked at him carefully, which made Alex involuntarily embarrassed, and then he hurried to Helen to hug his wife. Alex already understood perfectly well that an unpleasant conversation had taken place between the daughter and mother. "When you become a mother, you will understand me. I just wanted to wait a while after the wedding for you to ask for financial help. I know what it's like to live on a scholarship, and I don't want to wish that on my daughter. Understand, Helen, that I love you and want you to be a happy person. Therefore, do not refuse financial assistance." "Why has this mother changed her priorities?" the daughter asked in bewilderment. "But it was in vain that you joined my breed. She's just as stubborn as me. But in life this quality is not bad. You will achieve a lot. But now I won't talk to you about this topic, since I didn't come for this, but to see how you've settled here. Well, I see that your life is difficult, but without comfort. I have a proposal for you. Enough for you to drive around other people's corners. Let's buy a one-room apartment here. Just don't lecture me now. Yes, the refrigerator is empty. But we don't turn to you for help." Alex did not contradict his wife and soon rushed off to one of his friends. He was already turning the corner of one of the houses when his name was called. The man turned around and saw Elizabeth, who walked towards him with a smile. The woman came closer and said friendly. 2 days after the funeral, Alex invited his wife to visit his friends. However, his wife, citing illness, refused and invited him to take a walk on his own. Alex wanted to stay at home because he was worried about his wife's health. Helen saw that her husband was impatient to see his friends, and so she said, "Don't worry about me, my head just hurts a little. Nothing wrong with that. Go and take a walk." The couple went to the funeral, and here during the funeral ceremony Alex unexpectedly saw his former lover. The man greeted Elizabeth with restraint, and then presented her with his wife. Helen looked haughtily at the woman and answered the greeting dryly. She realized who this beauty was. At one time, Alex told her that he had a girlfriend who did not wait for him to leave the army. Helen purely intuitively understood that her husband had just introduced this woman to her. After some time, a one-room apartment was purchased. The married couple happily settled into their new place of residence and life slowly moved on as usual. Time flew by and the couple graduated from college and then got a job. Another 6 months passed since Alex's mother died of a heart attack. "I am married, and I love my wife. Therefore, let's not remember past relationships. Everything can be corrected. I don't think you've completely forgotten me. Hello. You forgot to add that you are a former gentleman. Well, hello, gentlemen. I don't hide the fact that I suffered from your betrayal for a long time, but that's in the past now. You know, there is such a word as burnt out. This is exactly what happened to me in relation to you. And now I have to go. I wish you to have a happy personal life in the future. Are you saying that you are not interested in what happened to me after our breakup? So know that I won't believe it. Your brother told me that you asked him how I was living. You were interested in what kind of relationship I had with my husband. Why do I need to know all this? You yourself chose your destiny at one time. But I'm divorced. My husband no longer needed me as soon as I gave birth to his son. First he cheated once, then again and again. And then my hubby told me that I was a burden to him. And after these words he kicked me out the door. So I had to return to my father's house. And now I'm a single mother. Alex returned home after some time. He told his wife about the meeting with a school friend, but the man kept silent about the meeting with his former lover. He didn't want his wife to become unreasonably jealous. Another day flew by unnoticed. There were a couple of days left before the couple left. Alex had already completely forgotten about Elizabeth when she unexpectedly paid a visit. Alex looked at the guest in surprise and asked why she had come. Elizabeth laughed and said with a sly note, "My kiss remembered our hot embrace. But this meeting is not the last," Elizabeth said with a victorious smile and went in her direction. "You were scared of the kiss, which means you are still thinking about me. And he only got married to annoy me. Okay, I won't hold you back now. I want you while you savor." And after these words, the interlocutor turned around and was just about to go further, when Elizabeth turned him around and kissed him passionately on the lips. The kiss lasted for several moments, and then Alex pushed his former lover away and said, "What are you doing? Don't ever do that again, don't come near me." Alex just wanted to rudely tell his former lover how his wife appeared, who sharply retorted the guest. "I came to meet an unfortunate woman who was just married for appearances. We did not prepare for your visit. And we don't have common interests," he answered gloomily. He intuitively felt that the guest had come for a reason and was up to something. And his guess was confirmed at that very moment, as Elizabeth said, "Is this how you greet dear guests? If you snatch a piece of a kiss, then be content with the scraps. And now, I think it's time for you to go home, since my husband and I definitely want to retire in the bedroom. I hope you don't need to chew it for what?" Elizabeth wanted to continue something further, but Helen said with a grin, "Why did you decide that?" Elizabeth asked with a grin, and then winked. "You are fundamentally mistaken. I can even tell you why. Surely your hubby forgot to tell you about our meeting the other day, as well as about the hot kiss. As I understand it, this is the girl who quickly wanted to marry the first person she met, did not wait for the guy from the army, and now decided to visit her former gentleman. Only my husband doesn't care about your person." Alex listened to his wife and immediately hugged her to him with tenderness. At the moment, he was grateful to her that the woman did not start a scandal. She judiciously accepted the situation without any hysterics, and therefore, in response, he told her, "This Elizabeth is an interesting person. What did she intend to change in her life with this visit to us? Did you really think that this way she could bring you back to herself? But you directly said that you have a beloved wife. Perhaps this visit is an act of retaliation, that you have a personal life, but she does not. Okay, there's no point in guessing. But from now on, dear husband, let there be no such secrets from me. Today I was not particularly pleased to listen to such words from your former passion. Dear, show your guest off, she has to go, just like you and me." As soon as Elizabeth left, Helen looked sternly at her husband. Alex realized that now there would be a showdown that he had never dreamed of. The man approached his wife and tried to hug her, but she pushed him away and reproachfully asked him to explain himself. Alex dejectedly told about the meeting with his former lover and about that ill-fated kiss that he did not want. Helen listened to her husband and said thoughtfully. After these words, Helen gently ran her palm over her husband's cheek and added quietly, "What kind of nonsense are you talking about? You have repeatedly heard that I told her to leave me alone. If your ex-lover does not understand the language, then you have a more rational solution on how to get rid of the annoying caller. But for some reason you don't want to use this solution. And this leads me to certain thoughts. Maybe you actually still have feelings for this beauty. If this is the case, then pack your things and go to her." After this conversation, the couple decided never to talk about this incident again, and soon they returned from the village to their home. However, Elizabeth made her presence felt a few days after leaving. She found out Alex's number from his brother and began calling him. The man asked not to disturb him, but Elizabeth continued to call anyway. Helen found out about this. She was angry with her husband that he could not deal with his former passion. And when Elizabeth called again, she said sarcastically, "Let's forget about this, Elizabeth. She is a thing of the past, and in general, let there never be secrets between us. Do I always have to tell you about everything? In my opinion, in our family, you are the man, not me," Helen said sarcastically, and then pointedly turned away from her husband, thereby letting him know that she was offended. After this conversation, Helen began to communicate coldly with her husband. "Look, I didn't even think about it. I could have advised earlier and not started a showdown. Don't play dumb. We live in the modern world and have been for quite some time. The phone has a function to put an unnecessary subscriber on the so-called blacklist, and thus this person will no longer be able to reach you. You don't do this. You continue to talk to her. And what is this solution?" Alex asked, puzzled. Alex looked at his friend, refilled the glasses, and offered them a drink. The men emptied the stacks. Alex picked up a small cucumber on his fork, wanted to take a bite, but immediately changed his mind, after which he looked at his friend again, and then told about his difficult relationship with his wife. Michael listened without interrupting. And when the guest fell silent, he said with a grin, "What happened to you? You didn't visit me often. And here with a strong drink. This is clearly not good. Come on, tell me, why wait?" Alex decided to visit Michael, with whom she maintained friendly relations after graduating from college. Alex came to his friend with a bottle of brandy. Michael looked at the guest in amazement and asked what had happened. Alex waved his hand and offered to drink. The owner of the apartment did not resist and quickly prepared a snack in the kitchen. He placed a sliced sausage, a jar of capers, and a pan of fried potatoes on the table. And after that, he invited his friend to sit at the table. Alex obeyed the request without further ado and immediately filled the glasses, which the men immediately emptied. And only after that Michael spoke first. Alex didn't know how to make peace with his wife. He had already bought flowers and asked for forgiveness, but all his attempts were unsuccessful. Alex was angry with himself that he could not find an approach to his own wife. And when once again he tried to reconcile with his wife again, and was defeated again, he left the apartment in anger, loudly slamming the doors. "What kind of heresy are you talking about, Michael? Before that, she didn't need feats, but now she does. Maybe she just stopped loving me. Just wait, drink. Your wife is also a unique person, just like her mother. Your mother-in-law, I also remember well from the wedding, a strong-willed woman. But that's not what we're talking about now. Helen just wants to see you as a kind of brutal macho. That's why she's sulking at you like that. You do everything in a typical way. We had a fight, and you bring flowers, which you present without any scandals. She wants actions from you. But you won't believe it. We never quarreled, and this Elizabeth should have pestered me. And I'm also an ass for not being able to blacklist her in a timely manner, although Helen is also good. You could have moved away and forgive me," Alex said sadly and refilled the glasses. "Your wife is one hell of a piece of cake. I still remember how she burned me when I attacked her. And I'm actually surprised at you. After all, you have been living together for several years, and you should know the habits of your wife, knowing the character of your missus. Michael, you can come up with all sorts of adventures. I don't think that Helen will want to gallop through the mountains, but still there is something interesting in your proposal. Okay, let's try. But definitely not today. I can advise you one thing: invite her to go on vacation. But I just warn you right away that don't offer the sea. It's better to go somewhere in the mountains, where there will be fewer people. There you will be in nature, you will be left to your own devices." "I'm asking." He replies that I am asking stupid questions. She says that if she hadn't loved her, she would have divorced long ago. But he categorically refuses to reconcile. I can't live with her like that, as if we were neighbors, and not husband and wife. Believe it or not, I'm stumped. I don't know what to do, and I also don't know how long this will continue. You didn't ask her about this? A couple of days flew by. Helen still remained cold. This infuriated Alex, and he again attempted to reconcile. This time, the wife did not say that she did not want to talk about such topics, as she had done before. She looked carefully at her husband, and Alex suddenly blurted out. Alex sighed in disappointment. He realized that he had made another mistake, and thereby turned his wife even worse against him. The man threw the blanket on the floor, then the pillow, and silently lay down, covering himself with the blanket. Alex wished his wife good night, but the answer was silence. Yes, you're drunk. That's what you're imagining. You will sleep on the floor today. The friends sat for a while, and then Alex went home. As soon as he entered the room, he saw that his wife was communicating with someone on social networks and was giggling at the same time. Alex tensed. It seemed to him that his wife was corresponding with her boyfriend, which he immediately said out loud. Helen, after her husband's words, put the phone aside and walked up to him. She sniffed and immediately said with disgust. Soon the couple went on vacation to the forest lands. They chose a place where there was a small path so that fishermen or hunters could rest. A small hut stood not far from the river. They were taken to the place by a local resident on a motor boat. The man dropped the couple ashore and agreed on how many days later to take them back. And soon the couple decided to settle in a new place. Helen was getting provisions, while her husband was trying to set up a tent. The woman watched him for a few moments, and then laughed and went to help. She came up and said tenderly, "An interesting proposal came from your lips. It will be very interesting to see what kind of tourist you will turn out to be." "I agree. Moreover, our vacation coincides and in the summer. Maybe you can conceive a child there. And climate change will happen." Helen looked at her husband in amazement. At the moment she was expecting another word of apology, but not such an offer. Meanwhile, Alex looked anxiously at his beloved, waiting for an answer. And after a few minutes the man heard her laughing. At this moment he was already surprised. The husband did not understand what caused this laughter. The woman had a little fun. Then she said, "We've been fighting for too long. Maybe let's go somewhere together. I would like to suggest a trip to the mountains or forest for a few days. You and I will be alone in nature. Can you imagine how much positive energy we will receive?" Her husband shouted back to her, "I listen, I obey, my commander. I begin preparations for dinner. By the way, it's your fault that you left so late. We could be here closer to lunch. Do you have your own inflatable boat, and are you impatient to buy it?" The wife said, laughing, and went on to unpack her backpacks. "But you heard, this lodge is for fishermen and hunters. What if such people come here, and we disturb them with our presence? And in general, you're not going to live in the same room with strangers, are you? Now you better think about what to cook for dinner. And I'll light a fire. I'll put up a tent tomorrow, since my nose will soon start to blow. I think we shouldn't expect guests today. At the very least, we'll squeeze into a hut for one night." "How stupid you are. Let me help. In general, why do we need this tent when we have a hut?" Soon the couple already settled in a new place. They had dinner sitting by the fire, and after talking a little, they went to the lodge to sleep. And the next day Alex woke up his wife early in the morning, who did not want to wake up. Helen asked her husband to give her another half-hour of sleep, but her husband was inexorable. He said in a deliberately menacing voice, "What could we do without it?" "Necessarily. You don't have to worry about this." "Honey, wait. Is a night of love not included in your range of activities?" Of course I was impatient. "We didn't just come to relax. We need to combine the useful with the pleasant. And this means that you need to pick mushrooms, berries, fish, and breathe clean air. Tomorrow morning we will do all this with you. Let's start with fishing on an inflatable boat. We have exactly 8 days for all these activities." Helen looked at her husband with concern. Alex smiled encouragingly and told her not to worry. And soon 2 men about 25 to 30 years old came out of the forest and headed towards the fire. They came up, said hello, and one of them said with a grin that today was their day. Helen felt a vague anxiety, and Alex, as if nothing had happened, invited his companions to join them. And then he added that very soon his wife would cook dinner. The men sat down, and one of them winked at Helen and said in one voice, 3 days had passed since the married couple lived in nature. They often went deep into the forest, where they picked mushrooms and, incidentally, blueberries. In the evenings, the couple sat near the fire and dreamed that they would spend their next vacation here, but at the same time they would definitely take a bucket with them, so that they could salt the mushrooms, of which there were many. 2 more days passed. Helen was already cooking over the fire. Alex sat nearby and repaired his daughter's coil. "I broke it this morning." Suddenly the couple heard the voices of men. And soon the couple caught 4 perch and a dozen other fish, and Helen happily began preparing soup, in between watching her husband chop wood for the fire. At the same time, the woman repeatedly thanked her husband for choosing to relax in nature. "Get up, or all the fish will go to other avid fishermen. And because of this, we will be left without a noble stew, which is most delicious if cooked over a fire. Let's not conflict. Still, we are civilized people and must remain human in all situations. We will go to the tent, and you will spend the night in the house. Dinner is ready, you can eat, and you can still find condensed milk and other canned food in your backpack. Listen, tourist, you better sit down, don't shake the air. We are famous people here and we won't listen to any bugs, because at the moment we turned to a pretty lady. But we didn't hear an answer, and this means that the beauty does not respect us. We don't accept this, said the man who had previously addressed Helen. After which the stranger approached the woman, intending to hug her, when Alex immediately jumped up to him and pushed the villain away. Helen shouted to her husband, "Dear, you shouldn't address my wife in this form. We treated you friendly. Beauty, I see you can cook, but can you give pleasure to the stronger sex?" Alex frowned at these words and stood up from the log. He said quietly but firmly. And at the same moment, Alex rushed at the talking hooligan. "We would have taken everything you offered anyway. But we want a woman's affection, because we walked so long to this gatehouse. Therefore, be an obedient girl, come to us and tell your fighter to calm his temper. It will be better for him." Helen didn't have time to finish speaking when one of the strangers beat her to it. He pushed the stranger in the chest, and he, unable to keep his balance, flew towards the side where there was a ravine. The second villain, seeing this situation, pulled out a knife and jumped up to Alex, striking him. Helen looked at this picture as if in slow motion. Initially, the woman was in a daze, but she immediately pulled herself together and picked up an axe from the ground and hit the attacking bandit on the head with its butt. The bully immediately began to sag. Helen then ran up to her husband, who was lying on the ground and holding his side. The man tried to get up. The wife saw a purple stain appearing on her loved one's t-shirt. She understood that Alex was wounded and needed to be bandaged, but there was no time for this, since a second scoundrel could appear from behind at any moment. So Helen helped her husband up. She asked him to be strong, said, "We need to get to the shore as soon as possible. Our boat is inflated. This is where we can leave now. Just hold on, my love." And at that moment, the woman heard the voice of the second bandit, who ordered her to stop. Helen realized that she could not waste a minute, since she, a fragile woman, could not compete with a healthy man. She used her last strength to help her husband reach the river, turned the boat over and lowered it into the water, helped her husband climb into the boat, and then pushed it away from the shore. She turned around and saw that the bandit was a few meters away from her. Helen jumped into the boat and began rowing vigorously with the oars. A few minutes later, the woman heard the voice of the attacker behind her, who called her abusive words and ordered her to row back. She turned around and saw that the bandit was already standing at the edge of the water and was preparing to swim after them. This action gave her strength. She doubled her efforts with the oars. She was able to turn around again only after some time, when she stopped hearing the bandit's voice, and the boat turned along the riverbed. At the same moment, Helen moved to her husband, who was breathing heavily. She took off her shirt, applied it to the wound, and then turned to her beloved in a gentle voice. The woman asked him only one thing so that he would not lose heart. Alex, smiling, replied that he was not going to do this. And then Helen said, "You are my best man in the world. We can handle it with you. The main thing is that you now press the rag firmly against the wound with your hand. I will row with all my might, and we will sail very quickly to the nearest village. And there you will receive medical assistance. You and I will succeed. You just need to believe. I have one more request to you: don't lose consciousness. I will speak, and you listen to my voice. Fine? Fine. I love you too. Then go ahead." Helen grabbed the oars and began rowing desperately. She told some stories to her husband, looking into his face. Sometimes she took short breaks to look around, and then continued rowing again. At one point, the woman saw that her husband was not reacting to her words. Helen at the same moment moved towards him and braked. The man opened his eyes and said with effort, "Everything is fine with me. I'm not going to die in a boat. Maybe I can help you row." And after that, he lost consciousness. Helen tried to revive her loved one, but she failed. Then she began to call for help, after which she again grabbed the oars and began to row again. Only about 15 minutes later, she saw houses nearby with light visible in the window. Helen screamed with all her might. After some time, she and her husband were already on the shore. Some stranger asked her about something, but the woman could not explain anything clearly and only asked to help her husband. Soon a lady in a white robe arrived ashore. It was a local paramedic. And a little later, an ambulance arrived and took Alex to the regional center to the hospital. After that, the local police officer already talked to Helen. She told what happened and also described the bandits who attacked them. A man in uniform wrote down a report and said that he knew the scoundrels who had done this, and also added, "Do not worry. These scumbags have been rampaging for a long time, but now they have really gotten into trouble. And if they commit such atrocities, and you know about it, then why are they still free?" Helen, the detective officer, angrily asked, "If my husband does not survive, then tell me, what will your word give me?" After some time, Helen had already transported her husband to a hospital in her city. She visited her husband daily, who had undergone 2 operations. The woman supported her loved one with positivity, and Alex chuckled in response and said that now he would not face any troubles if she was nearby. "I can't answer specifically, since I'm new to this position. Perhaps these scoundrels never took up knives, so they let everything go to the breaks. Believe me, now prison will await them. I give you my word." "Your pranks again? It's probably not enough. I beat you when we met when you attacked me. Your adventures will not lead to anything good." And once again, when Helen came to visit her husband, she noticed Michael in the ward. She listened to what the men were talking about, and at that very moment she learned that the idea to go and establish relationships in nature was the idea of a friend, not her husband. The woman laughed, and then, making a serious expression on her face, entered the room and immediately addressed Michael in a deliberately angry voice. "Helen, okay, that's how it will be next time. But you also promise me that you won't conflict with your sweetheart." And then he starts to get wound up, and I start to worry about him, answered Michael, who had already recovered from the unexpected appearance of his friend's wife. "You can relax, because I'm not going to hit you over the head with deodorant. You gave this wonderful idea to my husband so that we could spend time in a secluded place. And it's not your fault at all that these bandits were walking there. The main thing is that my Alex is alive and well, although the thugs will soon go to prison. But still, Michael, I earnestly ask you that in the future, if you propose any adventure, consult with me, especially if it concerns me." Michael looked confused at his friend's wife. He did not expect that she was eavesdropping on the conversation, and therefore did not know what to say in his excuse. Seeing Michael's reaction, Helen laughed and said, "Yes, we have already kept it secret. Alex painted for me how you fought with the bandits. It's scary to actually conflict with you now. I knew before that you were a fighting lady, but now I completely believe that you are an Amazon with a capital letter. By the way, Alex told me that you want to visit those places again. Are you even out of your mind? What if there are still bandits there?" Michael said politely. Then the conspirator winked at his friends. This was noticed by Helen, who suddenly realized that Michael was making fun of her. "I'll go see the attending physician. I've already heard what you discussed." The man politely greeted Helen after that and vacated his chair, which stood next to Alex's bed, inviting the woman to sit down and adding that he was about to leave. Helen smiled and said, Alex was soon discharged from the hospital. He stayed at home for a while and then went to work, and the couple's life moved on smoothly, at its own pace. Several months passed after the incident in the forest, when Alex suddenly received a call from his father and said that Ted was going to get married. Alex was happy with the news that his younger brother had found his other half and told his father about it. "You know about my military achievements. Why are you worried about me then? Although, by the way, next time we will take you with us and see what you are like." She immediately responded, "But this cannot be. He's younger than her. And I don't believe that there are feelings between them. I need to talk to Ted. In general, I'll try to take a day off and come to you as soon as possible. I hope this couple hasn't applied yet. Your brother's fiancée is the same Elizabeth who once did not wait for you from the army." But then I heard my dad snoring into the phone. Kirill immediately said gloomily that there was nothing good in this news. Alex asked, puzzled, what was wrong with Ted getting married, and his father immediately blurted out. Alex did not hide it and told Helen everything without concealment. Just as she was about to say something, her cell phone rang. It was Ted calling. Alex responded immediately. He irritably asked his brother to tell him how long he had been dating Elizabeth. The subscriber answered. Alex began to read morals to his interlocutor, but after a telephone conversation with his father, Alex called his brother, but he dropped the call. The man tried several times, but the attempts remained unsuccessful. Alex decided that he would call later. He got up from the sofa. The mood was spoiled, and at that moment the wife came, who had gone to a neighbor. Helen immediately noticed that her husband was not in a good mood, although before that he was in a good mood. The woman approached her husband and asked him to explain what happened. Next week, they are going to go to this marriage office. I've already talked about this a couple of times, but the only thing he said was that they were in love. Why don't you admit the idea that Elizabeth can fall in love with a person? Helen asked and looked carefully at her husband, who could not calm down after the phone call with his brother. Alex, after his wife's words, came close to her and quietly said, "What do you understand? Elizabeth just recently hung around my neck, talking about great feelings, and now, overnight, she suddenly fell in love with her brother. No, I don't believe it. I need to go to the village and talk to my brother alone." "What did you want, honey?" "Your brother is no longer a little boy. He has the right to his personal life." The husband's wife said quietly, "Don't start an old topic. We agreed with you." "But look, otherwise you'll recognize her," the wife said sadly. "She's such a woman. You just don't know her. That you are afraid that Elizabeth still has her old feelings for me, and now they are awakening again." Soon Alex arrived to his father and sat with his brother in the room alone. Ted proved that he and Elizabeth had serious feelings and asked not to meddle in his personal life. Alex listened to all his brother's arguments and firmly said that he wanted to talk to his beloved. Ted immediately frowned and replied that the conversation would take place only in his presence. Alex chuckled and said, "I won't." "That's it." She fell silent. "If you want to go, then go. I won't interfere." Soon Alex met Elizabeth in a cozy place where they had met before. The man looked straight at his ex-lover and asked why she was doing this. The woman smiled and replied that she had feelings for his brother. The interlocutor grinned and asked Elizabeth to stop deceiving him, to which she replied, "If the girl backs down, then what kind of love can you talk about? If a woman loves, then she is not afraid of any obstacles. Don't talk nonsense. I am afraid that you will put pressure on her, and she will succumb to your persuasion and refuse to marry me. Then you rejected me and married not for love. We have known each other for so many years. I didn't even know that your disguise was hiding such an insidious woman. Let's go back to the past. Did I reject you at one time? No, you did it, and I still continued to love you and hope for something. But time passed, and I was able to tear you out of my heart and fall in love with another girl. So it's clearer, and what is my guilt before you? Don't you know how rejected women take revenge? Your precious wife told me at our last meeting that I received a beggar's kiss. Well, then I'll take the royal dish, and this tidbit will be your brother. He will raise my son and indulge my every whim. You know, I got an even more tasty morsel than your passion. I thought we would have a conversation, but alas. When did you become like this? But what am I saying? You have always been like this, a woman who thinks only about her own well-being. Well, put your plan into reality. But remember that you will still be rewarded for this. We have nothing more to talk about. Bye. You have another way out. Let's resume our old feelings, Elizabeth said with a smile and tried to hug Alex, who pushed the woman's hands away with hostility, after which he looked point blank at his former lover and said bitterly, "Stop talking nonsense. I told you that the love has passed, and now all I ask of you is to leave your brother alone, because you don't need him. You'll hurt the guy. If you believe her, then get married. But you don't have to invite me to the wedding. Then don't say that I didn't talk you out of getting married. Plus, Elizabeth will probably deny everything." And so Alex said only Ted. Soon Alex came home, where his younger brother and father were eagerly waiting for him. Ted immediately rushed to ask how the conversation went. Alex grinned and replied that it was at the highest level. He understood that even if he told the contents of the conversation to his brother, he would not believe him. "Why did you give your brother consent to this marriage?" This short dialogue was listened to by Kurul, who was unpleasantly surprised by the words of his eldest son. As soon as Ted jumped out to his bride, he turned to Alex. If you don't want to attend the wedding, that's your right. I'm not going to insist, Ted exclaimed. Father, why do I need this to watch how the villagers will slander that Elizabeth turned her older brother's head, then abandoned him and went over to the younger one? Let Ted listen to it. But I will definitely transfer the money as a wedding gift. You're right here. There is no point in dissuading Volodya from this marriage. Let him beat himself up, since he doesn't want to listen to others. But are you seriously not going to attend the wedding? Father, there is no use in proving anything to Volodya. He is in love and apparently previously had feelings for Elizabeth. After which Alex fell silent, however. Seeing the simplifying look, he reported the conversation. Kirill, when he heard his eldest son's story, nervously rubbed the bridge of his nose and said bitterly, "Don't be nervous about trifles. Are you happy for your brother now? He is happy at the moment. Sincerely. But Elizabeth is just playing a role. Let him play." The husband did not object to the missus and agreed with her decision. Soon the marriage of Ted and Elizabeth took place. Alex was also there with his wife. The man often caught the evil glances of his former lover, and this made him feel uneasy. This was seen by his wife, who calmly at such moments, stroking Alex's hand and saying. Soon Alex returned to his wife. He told her everything in detail. Helen, having heard her husband's story, was discouraged and remained silent for some time. And then she suddenly said that it was necessary to attend the wedding. Alex was surprised by this statement and asked what it was for. The wife smiled and said that in this way they would show their superiority to the insidious fox, who behaves ugly. "Don't worry and tell me what's going on." Alex tried to calm down, saying that the time had not yet come for them to become parents and they just needed to be patient. Helen had no choice but to agree with her husband's arguments. 2 months have flown by. Alex was returning home from work when his father suddenly called to find out how his son was doing. Kirill did this regularly once a week. This time the elderly man made an additional call, which Alex found strange. He immediately told his father. Life slowly continued on. Alex and his wife worked and dreamed of having a child, but it was impossible to conceive. Helen has already been examined and received a verdict that her health is excellent. Then it was Alex's turn to visit the doctor, but the man was told that everything was fine with him in this regard. Helen began to get nervous about this. She couldn't understand what was wrong with her husband. "Everything you say is correct. But I feel sorry for Volodya." "Wasn't this to be expected?" the son asked angrily. "Son, the problem is that Volodya's wife left him. It closed. I do not know what to do. If you call, just don't talk about the fact that you once warned him about treachery." Alex came home. The wife was already at home at that time and was busy in the kitchen. The husband approached his wife, hugged her, and asked how she was doing. And then he reported on what was happening in his brother's family life. Helen listened and quietly asked what Alex was going to do. The husband thought about it. He didn't know what to answer his wife. There was silence in the kitchen. The first to break it was Helen, who asked, "Father, what do you want from me?" "I can't force Elizabeth to live with Vova." "Okay, Dad, I'll call my brother and talk to him, although I don't even know what to tell him. But you understand that if I say that everything will be fine, then I will give Vova hope in vain. I think that this cannot be done. Now it's not easy for my brother, believe me. He would not like to hear how he once made a mistake by deciding to marry his brother's former lover. You have to give him moral support and tell him that everything will still work out." Okay. Several days passed after the couple's conversation. Helen called her mother to find out how she was doing. Anne immediately replied that everything was fine. And then she added that she just wanted to recruit her daughter herself since she had an offer. Helen tensed internally, because she knew that if her mother had an offer, it would be out of the ordinary. The daughter quietly asked, "It would be nice for you to visit your mother. You said several times that you couldn't get pregnant. So I made a little fuss here and will refer you to a good clinic. And Alex will help you manage your garden. Let him work off the car I gave him for his birthday. How do you like the offer?" "Perhaps you are right, as always. I have always told you that you are a wise woman. Let this be, as you say, a false hope, but Ted will have time to realize everything and understand that he married the wrong woman. And then he will cope with the separation more easily, and also invite him to go on vacation. Sometimes this is the best option to sort out your feelings and everything else. You remember how we went to the forest with you? Then this trip brought us together. After calling her mother, Helen thought about the offer for a long time, and it seemed tempting to her. After all, she had a chance to appear to specialists. Secondly, there is an opportunity to spend time with my mother, whom I have rarely seen lately. As soon as her husband came home from work, Helen reported the call to her mother. Alex winced with displeasure. He was especially offended by the fact that he would have to work off the donated car. This circumstance did not escape his wife, and she immediately said guiltily, "I'm not rushing you. Just don't delay in answering. I would like the garden to give me a harvest this year, and not next." I don't know what to answer. Now I'm a little taken aback by your proposal. I can't make a decision on my own. I need to consult with my husband. Honey, I'll talk to her so that she's softer. And I don't mind helping. But as soon as I imagine that Anne will teach me again, all the desire to go to visit her disappears. I shouldn't have told you that. But you know my mom. As they say, what's in the head is on the tongue. Well, let's agree you go to your father and help. Now it's my mom's turn. Helen, can I see you for a few minutes? A week later, the couple were already sitting in Anne's living room. The owner of the apartment talked about purchasing a dacha, and then, looking at her son-in-law, told him what he had to do. Alex selflessly held his gaze and nodded to make it clear that his role was clear to him. After the conversation, Anne indicated which room was free, and the couple took it. Helen cheerfully unpacked her things and at the same time asked her husband how he was doing on his first day of visiting his mother-in-law. Alex answered with a smile that it was difficult to say for now. He wanted to add something else, but there was a knock on the door. The voice of the owner of the apartment was heard. "I can't refuse you. Call and tell Anne that we will be leaving soon. Let him prepare a festive table for this occasion and don't forget to bake a pumpkin pie." The next day, Anne took her son-in-law and daughter in her car to the dacha. The woman left provisions, told where the store was located, and also introduced her to an elderly man who was her neighbor in the country. The old man's name was Fedor. Before leaving, Anne said to her son-in-law and daughter. As soon as the wife entered the room, he immediately asked what the mother and daughter were whispering about. Helen smiled and replied that it was about pregnancy, and then she immediately added that her mother promised to show her to a brilliant specialist. But after a while, since he is on vacation. Alex nodded with satisfaction. Of course, the daughter said and rushed to her mother. Helen was absent for a long time. By that time, Alex had already laid out the sofa and lay down, reading a detective story. And she moved on. The daughter immediately shouted after her. Anne appeared at the dacha 2 days later. She busily examined the work done by her son-in-law and shook her head with displeasure. Alex saw that his mother-in-law didn't like something, and he asked to point out the shortcomings. The woman found fault with nothing. The branch here is cut unevenly. Alex laughed in response to this and said that it was a trifle. He was joined by Helen, who was present right there. Anne looked at them sternly and said, "If you think this is nothing, then I now understand why this is still a matter. The work plan is clear to you. I will visit you. If you need anything, call. And for help, if anything, contact Fedor. He is a skilled man. He has golden hands, not like some who. Well, okay, that doesn't matter anymore." The last words were addressed to her son-in-law, but the woman waved her hand and hurried to the car. She got into the car, honked the horn several times, and after that the car drove off. "Helen, this was not addressed to you." And again the woman, ignoring her son-in-law's question, got into the car and drove away. After his mother-in-law left, Alex turned to his wife with irritation, asking what her mother wanted. My wife shrugged her shoulders in bewilderment and advised me not to pay attention. Anne came a couple more times and each time found flaws in her son-in-law's work. Alex tolerated the woman's antics, but when his mother-in-law insulted him once again, and even in front of an elderly neighbor, telling him, the mother turned around and calmly answered, "What do you understand? Negotiate to the end. Get in the car. We're going home. Let him come to his senses a little. He's like a girl." Hearing these words, the neighbor grinned. And Alex called his wife, who was in the house, telling her that there was nothing more to do here and that she had to go home. Helen was shocked by her husband's words and asked what happened. However, Alex did not answer his wife, but collected his things and asked his wife whether she was with him or staying. The owner of the dacha looked at all this. And when she saw that her son-in-law and daughter were getting ready to go to the bus, she immediately said, "You really are not good at everything. You can't make a fence properly. Now I understand why you don't have children. Probably even in my pants there is a non-working tool." Alex realized that all the past barbs boiled down to only one thing to hurt his manhood, and in an intimate place. This thought angered the man. He wanted to repay his mother-in-law on the same coin, but he drove away this thought. Soon they arrived home. Alex was going to avoid being alone with his wife's mother to avoid a scandal. But still, at a certain moment they collided in the corridor, where Anne again, with a grin, repeated the hint that she had uttered at the dacha with a neighbor. "Nothing bad. Although maybe your husband will tell you." Anne answered with a grin. "Mom, what did you say again?" Helen said strictly at the same moment. He saw that his mother-in-law was sitting and calmly looking at him. Alex just wanted to leave the room when the landlady approached him and languidly said, "Why, my dear, did you decide to stop halfway? Come on, continue. Prove to me that you are a man." And after these words, the woman passionately kissed her son-in-law on the lips. And then, in turn, something clicked in Alex's brain, and in response he began to shower Anne with kisses. At the same time, the mother pretended that everything was fine. Meanwhile, Alex has come up with a plan to take revenge on his mother-in-law for her caustic tongue. In the evening, making sure that his wife had fallen asleep, he drank a glass, and then pulled down his pants and went into Anne's bedroom. The man wanted to prove in this way that he had dignity in his pants, and thereby drive this woman a little less angry, and then simply leave the room. But as soon as he entered the bedroom, something went wrong. Alex just wanted to answer something like this: "How did Helen appear?" The man pulled himself together and simply silently walked into the living room. That evening, Alex bought a bottle and, to his wife's surprise, drank a couple of glasses for dinner. Thus, the man wanted to relieve emotional stress after clashes with his mother-in-law. Helen understood that something had happened, but could not find out the truth. "You are my wife's mother. What are you talking about? It was just an obsession, and nothing more. You're not bad in bed. Come again today." After which intimacy occurred between them. When it was all over, the man quietly left the owner's bedroom. He downed his glass of strong drink again to drive away thoughts of what had just happened. He didn't want to think about anything at all. The next morning Alex got up, and he immediately remembered yesterday's scene. "However, my mother-in-law reminded me of yesterday," who, seizing the right moment, said. Over the next 2 days, Anne made attempts to lure her son-in-law into her room. Alex realized that this couldn't go on any longer. He told his wife that they were going home soon. Helen immediately objected, since she had not yet seen a specialist. The landlady immediately intervened in the dialogue between the spouses and supported her daughter with words. "This won't happen again," Alex answered clearly and hurried to his wife. "I just like making love with you." Naturally, he lied about work. But the man saw no other way out. Helen looked angrily at her husband and said that if he left, it would be a quarrel between them. Alex had to agree to his mother-in-law's proposal. However, this was not destined to come true, since a familiar gynecologist who wanted to take her daughter Anne was hit by a car, and Helen for some reason already refused to see another doctor, although her mother offered this too. Soon Alex and his wife left for their city. Alex was glad that he was now far from his mother-in-law, but the joy turned out to be premature. I'm against it. Moreover, they call me to work," Alex said in response. "Helen says everything correctly. Tomorrow she will be admitted to the clinic for several days, and at this time you and I will build a summer house and weed the garden." Alex, hearing his wife's question, was stunned. He looked at her intently, and then lowered his gaze to the floor. He is tired of being tormented by the feeling of guilt towards his beloved lately. Helen, however, demanded an answer, and she was not satisfied with her husband's silence. "What's happening? Why did your mother decide to change her attitude towards you?" as the woman called him. If he did not answer her, then Anne dialed her daughter and asked why her son-in-law did not answer her. Helen couldn't understand what happened, because her mother had never called Alex before, but here she was really annoying. In this regard, Helen decided to ask him the same question. "I slept with your mother," Alex said barely audibly, and covered his face with his palms. At that moment he did not know what awaited him, but his soul felt lighter, as everything's secret became clear. Now the man was waiting for words from his wife, and the answer did not keep him waiting long. as Helen calmly said. "You and I agreed that we will never deceive each other. Maybe I should keep my promise?" And when her husband once again did not answer her question, she quietly said, "I want you to immediately pack your things and leave," and never returned. "And please, I didn't ask for forgiveness, because I hate to listen." Alex tried to say something to justify himself, but when he saw his wife's gaze, he realized that she simply wouldn't hear him. The man stood up silently and began to collect his things. "It was just one time," Alex said, and immediately added, "I don't know what came over me. I only wanted to take revenge on your mother for her humiliation. But as soon as I entered the room, perhaps this is a consequence of alcohol. How long has this relationship been between you? Enough, go. I hope that we will see each other one more time, for the last time, in the courtroom during the divorce, and you will not haunt me with it. But with all this, I wish you happiness. And the last request is to prove that you are a man and do what I just said. Be that as it may, I love you. You are the most dear person to me." Meanwhile, Helen calmly looked at her husband's actions, and it was impossible to simply read from her face what emotions were raging inside her. Soon Alex collected a couple of bags and approached his wife. He again attempted to explain himself, but in response Helen gestured towards the front door. The man looked at his wife and said quietly, "What can I do? I'll change the SIM card so my mother-in-law won't get through. I'll go to my father, and now I need shelter for a few days to quit and check out of here. Let me stay with you for a little while." Alex soon left the entrance. He wanted to look at his windows, but immediately changed his mind and walked to the bus stop. The man was going to go to a friend, since now he simply had no one to go to. But soon Alex was sitting with Michael, who looked at his friend's things with bewilderment. And soon Michael learned the whole story, which angered him. He was not shy about swear words. He told his former classmate that he was a real sheep, and then asked what he was going to do. Alex shrugged his shoulders and answered in a dull voice, "I won't pursue you. I won't promise that I'll be a happy person," the husband answered, and was just about to go out when he realized it, took out the car keys, and put them on the nightstand with the words, "You'll give them to your mother." "I don't need any gifts from her. Maybe I can talk to her?" "No, I already gave her my word that I would not pursue her. And I must fulfill my promise. My missus went with the child to her family for a couple of weeks. So there's no problem with that. Maybe you shouldn't just cut from the shoulder so quickly. Your wife is a reasonable woman. After a while she will calm down, and you will talk to her." "Where is your wife?" It seemed to him that now he would never forgive himself. Soon Alex was already getting off the bus in the village with his things. He dreamed that no one would come across him along the way. Now I didn't want to talk to anyone and tell them why I was here alone, without my wife. But as luck would have it, his wishes were not destined to come true. On the way home, the man met Elizabeth, who was walking with her son. The woman looked mockingly at her former lover and said sarcastically, "Thank you, Michael, but no need. What has already happened cannot be corrected." A week later, Alex went to his father. During this time, he never called his wife and never even approached the house where he had lived with his wife for so many years. Alex realized that it was all his own fault, but he also understood that now he would reproach himself for a long time for what he had done. And he immediately added that Ted would not be a frequent visitor here now, since he got a job on a rotational basis. Hearing the news about his brother, Alex grinned and said, "Well done, Vova. I am happy for him. Maybe there in a foreign land he will meet his love. But I, Dad, will now be your guest. I'll take a break for a week, and then I'll go look for work." Although before voicing it, "It's worth asking your permission." After some time, Alex went to his father's house. He warned that he would come, but did not say that he would come with trunks and without his wife. Therefore, Kirill was amazed that his son was alone. He did not ask unnecessary questions, but offered to eat on the way. Alex thanked his father, but refused to eat and immediately asked how his brother was doing. Kirill smiled and replied that he was on the mend after a failed marriage. "You don't need to know that. You go your own way." Kirill only advised him to go to his brother and get away from everything there. "I have nothing to hide anymore. After all, I'm here for you forever." The son said quietly and then told everything frankly what happened to him. The father, having heard the story, sighed sadly but did not scold Alex because he understood that it was already difficult for him now. "Why ask stupid questions? My home is your home. But maybe you can tell me what happened." Of course, this same boat has such events, because Helen saved you on it. I hope you still have my boat. But you're right that I need to be somewhere. I know this place. I'll go to nature. They say this is the best medicine for the soul. There I'll be alone with my thoughts, and I'll pick mushrooms and berries for you too. He understood that these memories caused him mental pain, but still he was drawn here with an irresistible force. Soon Alex settled in place and went into the forest. He walked slowly, peered into the green foliage, and remembered how Ted once tripped over a tree root. He then pretended that he had sprained his ankle, and he picked him up in his arms and carried him to the guardhouse. And as soon as the hut appeared, "It's okay, Father, I don't care to continue living with this now." A couple of days later, Alex packed his backpack and left for another village. Soon he was already in the lodge where he and his wife had once rested. The man specifically chose this place. He wanted to remember those days when he and his wife were happy. Here the elderly man paused and looked guiltily at his son. Kirill realized that he reminded him of his wife. Alex smiled at that moment and said quietly. Alex winced. Since all this time, not a single person appeared here that was near him. And now he wanted to be alone to enjoy the memories and leave them here. That is why he was not happy about the sound of the engine. But the man hoped that perhaps the boat would sail further. However, this did not happen. The motor is on the pier near this shore. He decided that it was better to go for a walk in the forest right now, and then sail on the same day. He stood up, and without looking at the river where the motor had moored, lifted the basket to collect mushrooms. He wanted to remember how his wife saved here, worked with oars. And now there were 2 days left before sailing from this place, when he heard the sound of a motor. Alex winced, since all this time not a single person appeared here, which made him happy. And now he wanted to be alone to enjoy the memories and leave them here. That's why he wasn't happy about the sound of motor skills. But the man hoped that perhaps the boat would sail further. However, this did not happen, and the motor moored at this shore as well. Ted jumped to the ground laughing and began jumping. The man smiled from these memories. Time slowly moved on. Alex has already lived for the second week on the river. He understood that in a few days he would have to leave this place. The man also knew that he would have to sail on his own in an inflatable boat, and he was offered by a fisherman to pick him up from here, who brought him here. But Alex refused the offer. Alex slowly turned around and saw that a woman was standing there, and this woman was his wife, and Helen, walking smoothly, walked towards him with a smile. Alex, in prostration, could not understand that what was happening was not a dream, but a real picture. Helen was actually walking towards him. The man took a few steps towards him and spoke quietly. "What the hell are you doing here?" And after that, without turning around, he stepped towards the forest. The man walked a couple of meters when he heard a whistle. He stopped dead in his tracks, afraid to turn back. Only his wife could whistle like that. Meanwhile, a mocking voice rang out. "I can leave right now. If it's so disgusting. I came to rest and gain strength. I didn't expect you to either. How will we divide the territory now? I and you. Or maybe I'm expecting something completely different from myself now. For example, that same persecution," the interlocutor said quietly, half seriously, half jokingly. "But I promised not to pursue you. That's why I keep the man's word. It's easy to give up without a fight." Helen answered with a smile. "Who told you? Why did you come specifically?" "I came here on purpose because I knew you were here." "I don't understand you. Can you be clearer?" The husband said with bewilderment, who really couldn't understand what his loved one wanted from him. And at this time, seeing her husband's bewilderment, Helen came up to him and said, "What made you forgive me?" Before Helen had time to finish her sentence, she found herself in the arms of Alex. The husband gently showered his wife's face with kisses. She did not resist, but only stroked her wavy hair. When the first surge of emotions passed, Alex asked his beloved if she had forgiven him. Helen laughed back and replied that he was, in fact, a real sheep. And then she added that, of course, he was forgiven. There are so many unnecessary questions when action is needed in this situation. What a weirdo you are. Do you really need to chew basic things like a child? The woman said and gently ran her palm over her husband's cheek. And right now you are just as unshaven, and the stubble is prickling. Helen, seeing how happy her husband was, laughed and asked him not to shout, The husband immediately knelt down in front of her and said that he obeyed his queen, which caused a new fit of laughter from his wife. He again covered the face of his beloved woman with kisses, and then suddenly looked straight at his wife. The woman looked in surprise at Alex, who asked in confusion. Alex, hearing the latter, froze and then affectionately stroked his wife's stomach, and only after that he splashed out his emotions, jumped to his feet, and screamed at the top of his voice. Well, there were many reasons. Firstly, I love you very much, and secondly, your father told you how much you suffer from what he did, and also told you how everything really happened that night, although my mother told me a completely different tale. But believe me, no matter what my mother says, your guilt will not be removed. And thirdly, I don't want our child to grow up without a father. Are there enough reasons for you? I don't have a relationship with your mother. And to be honest, I don't want to see her. Are you interested in my or your relationship? What about your relationship with Anne now? You told me your version of what happened that night, and you did it first. I had to ask my mother, and she said you were the first to harass me. I don't know why, but I believed you, although your father didn't tell me everything. But now this is not so important. I'll just say that I'll forgive my mother when she apologizes and tells me honestly, and doesn't hide behind the fact that she was notified. Yes, even if this were so, she should have fought back, since first of all she is a mother, and then a woman. Now let's forget about it. I wouldn't like to remember the past. But we need to put an end to this. We don't communicate with her now. I believe you, Helen whispered with a smile and kissed her husband on the lips. We're not talking about that, adventurer. Otherwise I will be jealous. Like Othello, I am terrible in anger. Now come to me. And guess what? I will never let you suffer. I hurt you, and it makes me sick. I promise like a man that I won't offend you. And by the way, your adventurer Michael advised me to tell you this way. He was worried about our relationship, came to me and begged me to forgive you. And then, when I found out I was pregnant, I said that the most romantic place is in nature, when you don't expect it at all. It looks like Michael will become our child's godfather and teach him wisdom, Helen said with a laugh.